Chapter 1993. Huan Country. Xiao Hua pretended to be confused. The three cultivation countries are Shi, Meng, and Lian. This Huan Country is the land of sword cultivators. Zhu Chenghe glared at Xiao Hua and muttered, "Which pedantic foundation establishment cultivator is your master? He didn't even tell you this. No wonder he can only be a foundation establishment cultivator. Hee hee. Xiao Hua didn't dare to say more and simply pretended to be ignorant. That cultivator from my Dao sect is very powerful with his flying sword. He actually won all 9 battles in Huan Country and returned victorious," Zhu Chenghe said proudly. "Ah, really?" This was the first time Xiao Hua heard of this. He was shocked. If he defeated a sword cultivator with a Dao technique, it wouldn't be a big deal. However, he actually won with a flying sword. This was a disgrace to sword cultivators. "Which sect is this senior from? He's so powerful," Xiao Hua asked. "Which sect can he be from?" Zhu Chenghe sighed. 7 skills sec. Xiao Hua said without hesitation. Zhu Chenghe glared at him and said, "Do you think only your Shi country's 7 skills sect knows about flying swords? Hehe, I'm just a frog in a well. Senior, please enlighten me." Xiao Hua scratched his head and said embarrassedly, "It's Meng country's Changbai sect." Chen Yi said clearly, 7 skills sect's flying sword is only because the current sect master, Liu Ni, is good at it. Therefore, many disciples cultivate flying swords. However, Changbai sect is established with flying swords. Other Dao techniques are just vassals. So it's like that. Xiao Hua easily thought of Liu Weigang, the Qi refinement disciple who used a flying sword to chase after Zun Shu during the Feather Immortal gathering. He thought, no wonder. Yes, it's Changbai sect from Meng country. Zhu Chenghe nodded and said, "That senior's name is Reverend Brightsword. He should have been an early nascent soul cultivator at that time. Senior Zhu, did you come to Mojiao Black Forest to find the remains of Reverend Brightsword?" Xiao Hua asked curiously. Hehe, don't worry. Zhu Chenghe smiled and said, "After Reverend Brightsword returned from Huan Country, he became famous in Meng Country and became the next leader of Changbai sect. As for the Huan Kingdom's sword cultivators, they were dejected. Many people began to have doubts about sword cultivators. Of course, Huan Country also has spiritual sword and divine sword swordsmen. They can't possibly attack Reverend Brightsword who has a low cultivation level, so they can only think of other methods. However, Reverend Brightsword is indeed powerful. Not only are first-grade sword transformation stage cultivators unable to be his match, even in the final battle against a second-grade sword transformation stage cultivator, who is equivalent to a mid-Yuanying stage cultivator, he was still slightly superior. In an instant, he broke the myth that a sword cultivator's attack power is stronger than a Dao cultivator of the same level. However, it's not like Huan Country doesn't have any geniuses. At that time, there was a rising star in Huan Country called Li Shoubai. His cultivation was similar to Reverend Brightsword's, and he was also a first-grade sword transformation realm cultivator. This Li Shoubai's innate talent is unrivaled. Since he was young, he had spiritual energy and perseverance. Others only nurture 1 sword pill. Some extremely powerful ones only nurture 3 at most. They are called the 3 stars glorious sun, but he actually nurtured 9 sword pills in one go. Ah! 9. Xiao Hua almost cried out in surprise. Wasn't this number the 9 shattered sword pellets he obtained from the deafening Thunder Palace? What's wrong? Seeing Xiao Hua's strange expression, Zhu Chenghe asked curiously. "Ari, this sword cultivator senior, if my master was here, he would definitely reprimand him. Biting off more than you can chew." Xiao Hua had a bitter smile on his face. He said empathetically, "Others cultivating 3 is already the limit, but he actually wants to cultivate 9. This is really beyond this junior's expectations. However, since senior said so, Senior Li Shoubai's 9 flying swords must have been cultivated. This kind of rare genius, this junior, really can't imagine. H. Not only you, even I find it hard to understand." Zhu Chenghe sneered. "Other people's 3 sword pills are 3 stars glorious sun, but his 9 sword pills are transit of the sun 9 stars transit of the sun, That's an extremely high realm among sword cultivators. It's the legendary divine sword realm's sword immortal. Since childhood, Li Shoubai's goal was to cultivate to the divine sword realm and become a sword immortal. Chen Yi's face was filled with longing as she said, moreover, under his tenacious nature, under his heaven-gifted genius, those 9 sword pills were born by him one by one. He named them Fledgling Star, Morning Star, Emblem Star, Brilliant Star, Dual Star, Dark Star, Star Destroyer, Star Extinction, and Star Creation. Ari, heaven knows, it's already difficult for a sword cultivator to control 3 flying swords. How could he control 9 Great Spirit Sword? That's right, Reverend Brightsword went to Huan country to challenge Li Shoubai. Unfortunately, he went at the wrong time. Li Shoubai actually went to Million Mountains to train. He didn't meet Reverend Brightsword. Zhu Chenghe continued, when he returned to Flame Bamboo Sword sect and learned about Reverend Brightsword, he was extremely angry and immediately came to Meng country to challenge Reverend Brightsword at Changbai Sec. Good Xiao Hua's eyes flashed with a trace of brilliance as he praised, that will definitely be a battle that will shock the entire Xiaoyu continent. That's right. At that time, the cultivators of the 3 cultivation countries all heard the news and immediately moved. They wanted to see this battle of sword and Dao that is hard to come by in tens of thousands of years. Zhu Chenghe's face was also filled with longing as he said, all the big sects, big clans, and many famous cities were all eagerly waiting for news about the time and location of the battle to come. Unfortunately, Li Shoubai aggressively went to Meng country and even rushed to Changbai sect. However, Reverend Brightsword of Changbai sect treated Li Shoubai with respect and was very humble. However, once Li Shoubai entered Changbai sect, there was no more news, as if he didn't even appear. Chen Yi said softly in front of them, until half a year later, Reverend Brightsword and Li Shoubai announced to the world on Changbai Peak that the 2 of them agreed to duel in a secret place. Moreover, they agreed to never announce the result of the duel to the public. At that time, whether it was the 3 cultivation countries or Huan country, all the sword cultivators were in an uproar. Huan country's Flame Bamboo Sword sect even sent an elder to Changbai sect in Meng country, as if to urge senior Li Shoubai. Zhu Chenghe's face was filled with reminiscence as he said, however, when the Flame Bamboo Sword sect's elder came to Changbai sect, Reverend Brightsword and Li Shoubai were both gone. Li Shoubai left a jade slip and said that he was going to duel with Reverend Brightsword. As for where he went, Changbai sect's sect master and elders also didn't know. Flame Bamboo Sword sect originally thought that Li Shoubai had been used a secret technique by Changbai sect, but when they saw Li Shoubai's jade slip, they naturally had nothing to say and could only wait on Changbai Peak. This wait lasted for another half a year. Zhu Chenghe sighed and said, until one day, Reverend Brightsword's disciple saw that there was some movement in the sect's messaging secret array. After recognizing that it was Reverend Brightsword who sent the message, he immediately informed the sect master and Flame Bamboo Sword sect's elder. At this time, Reverend Brightsword's life tablet in Changbai sect was also damaged. When Changbai sect's sect master and Flame Bamboo Sword sect's elder saw Reverend Brightsword's nascent soul image transmission, they knew that the duel had already ended. Reverend Brightsword really kept his promise and didn't say a word about the result of the duel. He only arranged some matters in the sect and then turned off the image transmission. -8. Chapter 1994. However, Immortal Brightsword's natal spiritual tablet was damaged, indicating that he had died. Even his nascent soul could not escape. At first, the elder of Flame Bamboo Sword sect thought that Li Shoubai could win, but after waiting for a long time, Li Shoubai did not return, so he hurried back to Huan country. It is said that Li Shoubai's natal spiritual tablet also had a crack. The 2 of them actually perished together. Immortal Brightsword's last words were not completely spread, but there was a sentence that all the sword cultivators in Meng country knew. Without waiting for Zhu Chenghe to finish, Zhong Yefeng and Xie Zhiqian both said in unison, "Sword Dao has no regret." Yes, it is this sentence. Zhu Chenghe nodded. Although our Taoist sect uses flying swords as magic tools, unlike sword cultivators who use their lives to nurture their swords, they still use their swords as their lives. Immortal Brightsword's sentence really hit the bottom of my heart. Yes, for this battle, all the sects have their own guesses, and there are records in their own ancient book. Qiong Yefeng nodded, but what actually happened, no one knows. In order to find the truth, all the sects sent out their forces, first in Meng country, then in Shi country and Lian country, and even in Huan country. We didn't find any trace of it. Zhu Chenghe said again. However, in the end, the head of Changbai sect found clues from Immortal Brightsword's nascent soul and concluded that it was in Shi country's Mojiao Black Forest. It may even be in the core. So, Changbai sect secretly searched Mojiao Black Forest, and lost a lot of experts, but still found no trace. Later, this news was discovered by some people, and it was completely leaked, attracting many sword cultivators to come here to search. What was the result? Xiao Hua suddenly asked a seemingly extremely stupid question. Chen Yi said with a smile, if they found it, why would we come here today? Xiao Hua said with a smile, what I mean is, Mojiao Black Forest is so big, and there are thousands of cultivators in Shi country, how could they not find it? Even if Mojiao Black Forest is dangerous, what about Fenshan stage seniors? What about Dacheng stage seniors? Can't you just ask any one of them? Haha, little friend Xiao, you still don't understand. Xie Zhiqian smiled and said, I heard that there is a famous rogue cultivator in your country of Shi. I think he is called Old Man by Zhong. His cultivation technique can be cultivated to the foundation establishment stage, which is a great temptation to rogue cultivators. Many rogue cultivators are looking for him. You must have had such a plan back then, right? But if the current you were to ask you to search for his orthodoxy, would you go? Yes, I understand. Xiao Hua nodded. Daoist Master Brightsword and Li Shoubai are indeed handsome for a while and can be considered world-shaking. But in front of these seniors, they are still nothing. Yes, that's one thing, Zhu Chenghe said with a smile. On the other hand, in the three kingdoms of cultivation, Daoist magic cultivation is still the priority. There are few cultivators who practice flying swords, so no one will invest more in the whereabouts of these two people. Enlightened Master Brightsword's orthodoxy was in the Changbai sect. Li Shoubai's orthodoxy was also in the Flame Bamboo Sword sect. What he needed to find was Reverend Brightsword's longsword and Li Shoubai's 9 stars transit. However, since the two of them had already perished together, their flying swords might not be intact. Even if they were found, it would be useless for sword transformation swordsmen and nascent soul cultivators. I understand. Xiao Hua nodded and said, for seniors are looking for these 10 flying swords, as well as the remains of the 2 seniors and their storage bag. Yes, for us golden core cultivators, these things are the most attractive. Zhu Chenghe did not hide it and nodded. If we can obtain their legacy, it will be extremely useful for us to break through to the nascent soul realm. It might even be our only chance. Then, Zhu Chenghe glanced at Qiong Yefeng and said, although the various sects have their own guesses and have their own opinions about the place of their jewel, they have overlooked one point. This is also something that I suddenly realized when I saw that place. What point? Qiong Yefeng asked. That's right. Fellow Daoist Zhu, what point is it? Xie Zhiqian was also eager to know. After all, he also did not understand how Zhu Chenghe could know about such a secret place. Hehe, I'll keep you in suspense for now. Zhu Chenghe laughed and said, when you see it, you will naturally understand. At that time, I didn't think too much about it until I saw the strange scene there. However, it was also because of this that I felt that I didn't have much confidence in breaking in, so I retreated to find the 3 of you to help me. Then, he glanced at Xiao Hua and said, I didn't see the heavenly yin grass, but according to my guess and the sect's records, it should be there in that environment. Yes, I hope Senior's guess is correct. At this time, Xiao Hua's heart was far less bitter than before. Since he knew that Zhu Chenghe and the others were looking for 10 flying swords, and that it was related to sword cultivation, Xiao Hua was already eager to try. Even if there was no heavenly yin grass, this trip might still have a harvest. The heavenly yin grass's nature is neutral, its nature is neutral and yin and yang. Chen Yi was very familiar with spiritual herbs and whispered. Hu Tilda at this time, a divine sense swept over from afar, sweeping past everyone and immediately locking them. Zhu Chenghe was extremely embarrassed and angry, and with a light rebuke, his divine sense also rushed out. Fellow Daoist, help me. A slightly old voice transmitted from where the divine sense swept over, and the tone was very anxious. This is bad. Zhu Chenghe's divine sense swept over and immediately knew the origin of the matter. His face was slightly shocked, and he whispered, "This is that shameless cultivator. He couldn't get rid of Mo Jiao himself, so he actually led him to us. Quickly get out, don't let that guy find out about the secret passage here." Chen Yi's divine sense was not inferior to Zhu Chenghe's, and she immediately urged. Xiao Hua and the others didn't dare to be negligent, and they quickly followed Zhu Chenghe out of the secret passage. Just as they escaped the range of the secret passage, Xiao Hua felt a kind of pressure on his body, forcing him to land on the ground. Moreover, a thick black thing rushed towards his body like a swarm of bees, and the Yusho could only block a small part of it. Looking at Chen Yi and the others again, their bodies were flashing with light, as if the light around them was blocking the black thing around them, and they were still flying about 10 feet away. "Xiao Hua, can you fly?" Xie Zhiqian asked. "This is really strange. This is only the edge of the Ink Jiao Black Forest. How did Mo Jiao fly out from the middle to the outside?" "Junior can fly, but it consumes a lot of magic power," Xiao Hua said with a wry smile. "Junior had better try his best to fly below, and I hope to get rid of this trouble as soon as possible. Let's go. We'll go and meet him." Zhu Chenghe waved his hand and said, "Yes." Qiong Yefeng and the others responded, and they all flew up. Xiao Hua didn't dare to release his Buddhist consciousness, and his divine sense was obviously limited in the Ink Jiao Black Forest, so he naturally had to hide his strength. After flying for a few miles, Zhu Chenghe waved his hand, and Chen Yi and the others hid on a tall black tree, while Xiao Hua half flew and half crawled on a black tree. Roar. A roar that sounded like a dragon's roar and a wolf's howl could be heard from a few miles away. The voice of the cultivator who was running for his life could also be heard. "My fellow cultivators, there are 2 Mo Jiao behind me. I only came here because I had no other choice. If you help me kill these 2 Mo Jiao, I won't take anything from you. In fact, I would like to thank you for your help." Zhu Chenghe snorted and didn't answer. In less than half a cup of tea's time, waves of black waves rose up in front of them, and the black thing unique to the Ink Jiao Black Forest was thrown into the air as if it was swept up by a hurricane. The Black Forest, which looked calm just a moment ago, was now swaying from side to side, as if it was split by a huge wave. Xiao Hua could even hear the sound of trees falling to the ground in the distance. Hiss. When a cultivator in a light green robe flew over, Xiao Hua saw the Mo Jiao that was chasing the cultivator, and he couldn't help but gasp. The Mo Jiao was as black as its name. Its whole body was pitch black, and it was even darker than the black trees around it. Moreover, there was a kind of glossy gloss in the darkness, and it was obvious that the skin of the Mo Jiao was extremely hard. Moreover, the Mo Jiao was 30 feet long and 3 feet thick. Its body was like a black snake, but it was different from a black snake. The front part of the Mo Jiao's head had an additional membrane, and there were bony forks protruding from the membrane. At this time, it was swaying back and forth, as if it was angry. The other parts of the Mo Jiao's head were similar to a snake's head, but its fangs were protruding out, and its fist-sized eyes were flashing with red light. Looking at the tail of the Mo Jiao, it was indeed similar to a python's. It was slightly thick, and it was in the shape of a fish's fin. What surprised Xiao Hua the most was that there was a pair of 1-foot-long wings in the middle of the Mo Jiao's body. At this time, it was flapping up and down, and a strong wind was stirring up above the pitch-black membrane. It was somewhat similar to the wings of a thunder beast. Roar. The Mo Jiao in front roared angrily, and its tail swayed violently, hitting the black trees around it. The extremely hard black trees were like firewood in the face of the Mo Jiao's tail, and they were easily overturned. The Mo Jiao flew into the air, and with the flap of its wings, it flew far away. "TSK, TSK. Xiao Hua was very impressed. He thought to himself, "This Mo Jiao is indeed a natural spiritual creature. Mo Jiao Black Forest, Mo Jiao Black Forest, this is the nest of the Mo Jiao. I don't know what kind of amazing magical powers it has." Just as Xiao Hua thought to himself, Mo Jiao, who was tailing them, also roared and raised his head high. Then, he suddenly stretched his head forward and spat out a swirling mass of black gas, which shot straight at the cultivator who was fleeing in front of him. "Oh my, it's so powerful. Xiao Hua's divine thoughts swept through the area, and he could see clearly that the pitch-black mass of air was not only condensed by the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, but more importantly, the special black thing in the Mojiao Black Forest had filled the entire mass of air. Moreover, balls of different sizes were condensed in the mass of air, colliding and rotating with each other. Xiao Hua's divine thoughts seemed to be attracted by the black thing in the mass of air. -8. Chapter 1995. When the cultivator who was being chased saw Mo Jiao spit out a strange mass of black gas, his expression changed drastically. He hurriedly waved his hand, and a magic treasure that looked like a lotus flew out of his hand. It turned into a tricolored arc that protected his back. However, as soon as the magic treasure left his hand, the black things in the surroundings swarmed toward it as if they were attracted to it. In just a moment, the tricolored arc absorbed a lot of the black things, and its brilliance became somewhat dim. Mo Jiao's mass of black gas was like a fish swimming in the dark forest, and it quickly dived into the tricolored arc. With a loud bang, the tricolored arc collided with the mass of black gas, and a huge force stretched the arc extremely long. With another bang, the mass of black gas broke through the arc and smashed into the cultivator's back like a meteor. "My fellow cultivator, help me." When the cultivator saw that his magic treasure was easily destroyed, he panicked. However, it was obvious that this was not the first time it had been destroyed. Therefore, he turned his body nimbly and pounced on Zhu Chenghe, who was standing on his left. The mass of black gas was originally going to pounce on the cultivator, but because of the sudden change in the cultivator's body, it could not completely catch up with him. Instead, it made a slight turn and smashed into Zhu Chenghe. Damn it! Zhu Chenghe did not expect the cultivator to be so insidious. He did not even wait for the cultivator's name to be introduced, and he did not even give any warning. The cultivator brought the disaster to him, and he could not help but feel angry. However, when the mass of black gas was about to hit him, he could not care less. He shook his Taoist robe and raised his right hand from it. At this time, Zhu Chenghe's right hand had a faint golden color, which was particularly obvious in the dark forest. This faint golden color repelled the black things outside, and it could not be absorbed. "Kill!" Zhu Chenghe shouted in a low voice and swung his right arm straight down. A golden brilliance appeared from his hand like a sword, and it slashed directly at the mass of black gas that was coming toward him. A buzzing sound was heard as the sword light struck the black gas. It sounded like the buzzing of a hornet. The golden brilliance circulated at an extremely fast speed. It was as if the sword light was cutting the black gas with a saw. At the same time, the force of the mass of black gas bent the sword light. Zhu Chenghe's Taoist robe and hair were blown backward. His right arm trembled slightly, and his whole body was moving back inch by inch. "Villa Head Chen, help me." Zhu Chenghe's Dharma power was rapidly depleted. When he saw the other Mo Jiao in the distance raised her head high again, he knew that things were not going well, and he immediately shouted, "Fellow cultivator Zhu, wait a moment." When Chen Yi heard Zhu Chenghe's cry for help, she waved her hand. After a ray of light flashed, a string of floating flower petals flashed in the air and fell on the mass of air like a fairy scattering flowers. When the petals touched the mass of black gas, all the petals turned into rotating flying swords, stabbing into the mass of black gas from all direction. Boom boom boom, there was another burst of noise. After the roaring noise subsided, there was a soft puff sound. First, it came from Zhu Chenghe's sword light. Then, the air mass seemed to be pierced everywhere. Pa 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 sounds were incessant. At the same time, the black things that had condensed into black clumps once again flew out in all directions. Not only did they attack Zhu Chenghe and Chen Yi, but they also attacked the cultivator who had lured the source of the trouble to the side. "Go!" Zhu Chenghe and others roared, and the flying swords in their hands were waved again. The flying swords turned into stars and stabbed on the black balls. These black balls were much easier to deal with than the mass of black gas. After the sword light passed, they turned into black fog and scattered in the air of the black forest. Zhu Chenghe scanned the fleeing cultivator with his divine sense. The cultivator didn't even look back. With a wave of his sleeve, a faint green brilliance spread out. A wooden stick flashed and scattered the black balls. His figure continued to fly behind Zhu Chenghe and the others, as if he didn't care about the situation Zhu Chenghe and the others were in. Zhu Chenghe was furious. He had thought of this long ago, but he was afraid that the secret path would be exposed, so he had no choice but to come out and help. At this time, he was with Chen Yi and others. They were too big of a target, and they could not be compared with the fleeing cultivator. They would definitely be chased by Mo Zhao. Villa Master Chen, fellow cultivator Qiong, fellow cultivator Xie. Zhu Chenghe did not think too much and said, "Since we have met Mo Zhao, it is a chance. We are confident that we can defeat him." Well said. Chen Yi squinted her eyes when she saw Mo Zhao. She knew that Mo Zhao was full of treasures. Usually, Mo Zhao would hide in the depths of the Black Forest, and she would not dare to enter. How could she not be happy when Mo Zhao delivered himself to her? "I will team up with fellow cultivator Qiong," Chen Yi shouted and flew forward. She waved her hands, and clusters of flowers flew out. The flowers were rainbows formed by the sword light. Okay. Qiong Yefeng, who was not far away from Chen Yi, was already on guard. When he heard Chen Yi's words, he did not say anything. He coordinated with Chen Yi's angle, and the huge sword in his hand, which was more than 10 feet long and half a foot wide, slashed through the air. It was like a door plank, and slashed toward Mo Zhao, who was closest to them. "I am coming too," Xie Zhiqian shouted and flew up with Zhu Chenghe. A flying sword flew out from his hand like a meteor, and pierced the right eye of the other Mo Zhao. Roar. The two Mo Zhao were angry. The Mo Zhao that had been accumulating power flapped its wings and opened its mouth to spit out a cloud of black gas toward Chen Yi. The other Mo Zhao opened its mouth and spat out 2 clouds of black venom, which turned into sharp arrows, toward the flying sword that was coming toward them. "Don't take it head-on," Zhu Chenghe quickly reminded Xie Zhiqian when he saw that the flying sword was close to the venom. "Fellow cultivator Zhu, please know that I's flying sword has." Xie Zhiqian did not take it seriously. He smiled and was about to explain when he heard a sizzling sound. Xie Zhiqian was shocked when he saw that the Mo Zhao's venom had eroded the brilliance around the flying sword. The brilliance of the flying sword had become much dimmer. "Keep." Xie Zhiqian did not dare to be careless. He recited the sword formula and retrieved the flying sword. He scanned it with his divine thought and saw that the 3-inch-long flying sword was covered with black spots. It looked like a rusty iron sword. "Fellow cultivator Xie, the Mo Zhao's venom is mixed with the black sand in the Black Forest. It is extraordinary." Zhu Chenghe smiled bitterly. "It is the nemesis of my flying sword. If it were not for the fact that the Mo Zhao could not spit out too much venom, we would have to run away." As Zhu Chenghe spoke, 2 clouds of brilliance flew out from his hand and blocked in front of him and Xie Zhiqian. The brilliance was slowly annihilated by the Mo Zhao's venom. However, due to the brilliance, the venom was completely consumed. "Quick! Mo Zhao seems to be trying to escape." Zhu Chenghe was about to talk to Xie Zhiqian when he scanned the area with his divine thought. As expected, Mo Zhao, who had spat out the venom earlier, saw that both the venom and the air mass were ineffective. Moreover, there were 4 powerful cultivators in front of him. He quickly flapped his wings and turned his body nimbly as if he was about to fly away. -8. Chapter 1996. Zhu Chenghe had noticed it, and Chen Yi was even more aware of it. Her flying swords had already landed on Mo Zhao's body. The flying swords created a series of sparks on Mo Zhao's black body, but they could not hurt Mo Zhao at all. "Go." Chen Yi could not allow the fatty meat in her mouth to escape. She rubbed her hands, and more peanuts flew out. Moreover, Chen Yi opened her mouth and spat out a cloud of pink mist. It suddenly expanded in the air and turned into a light veil. It covered Mo Zhao from top to bottom. Mo Zhao flapped his wings and flew away. However, as soon as he cast out the light muslin, a strong restrictive force was generated and firmly restrained them. It was as if a huge hand had grabbed them. Roar. Mo Zhao was furious. He tried his best to twist his body. His 2 fin-like tails were suddenly lifted up and drew 2 black shadows in the air. He almost swept the black wood that Xiao Hua was climbing and hit the light veil's magical weapon from the side. Puff, puff. Two soft sounds rang out as the two hammers smashed into the veil. The light on the veil immediately dimmed, and Chen Yi's face flushed red. "Don't worry, Villa Master Chen. I will help you." Zhu Chenghe smiled bitterly in his heart. Chen Yi was too greedy. Not only did she not wait for him to take out his Dharma treasure, but she also wanted to trap the two Mojiao. That was why she was hit by the powerful force of the Mojiao. However, the moment Zhu Chenghe activated the three Dharma treasures in his storage bag, Mojiao did not fly away. Instead, he dived into the ground and disappeared into the dark ground in a flash of light as he dived into the ground. Earth escape. Xiao Hua was stunned. "Go after him." Chen Yi waved her hand, and the pink veil fell into her hand. She shouted softly, and the colorful light around her body flashed. It seemed that she was going to chase after Mojiao. "Villa Master Chen," Zhu Chenghe whispered, "the 5 elements escape skill is useless in Mojiao Black Forest." Alas, Chen Yi suddenly came to an understanding when she heard this, and she slapped herself on the forehead and laughed bitterly. "I was in a hurry and forgot about this matter." Immediately after, the 5-colored brilliance around Chen Yi gradually disappeared, revealing Chen Yi's embarrassed and angry expression. "Ahem." Zhu Chenghe coughed and said, "Even if Villa Master Chen knows the rare 5 elements escape skill, I'm afraid that he is no match for Mojiao, who is born with the earth escape skill. We are not fated to fight Mojiao today." "Hihi, Manor Lord Chen, you don't have to regret it." Qiong Yefeng held the giant sword in his hand and said with a smile, "Mojiao is rarely captured in the Black Forest because it can escape. Unless you use the talisman that condenses the ground into toughness at the very beginning, who would have prepared for Mojiao's sudden appearance?" Xie Zhiqian smiled bitterly. At this point, everyone thought of the cultivator who lured Mojiao here and looked in the direction that the cultivator had fled. Unfortunately, other than the pitch-black sky and the branches of the black tree, where were the figures of cultivators? "Ari, let's go." Zhu Chenghe raised his head to look at Xiao Hua and said, "Just treat it as being a good person this time. H, if I see this cultivator next time, I will definitely kill him without saying anything." Chen Yi said angrily. However, before she could finish her words, a familiar voice came from afar. "Fellow cultivator, help me, ah." Xiao Hua was stunned. Wasn't that the cultivator who had escaped just now? This guy dares to come back. Xiao Hua was extremely surprised. He had never thought that there would be such a shameless cultivator in the world. However, before Xiao Hua could speak or look at the expressions of Chen Yi and the others, Zhu Chenghe's countenance instantly went ghastly pale. He slapped his hand and withdrew 4 jade slips from his storage pouch, and his divine sense swiftly wrote something on them. After that, he waved his hand and the jade slips flew towards Chen Yi and the others, and he cried out, "Fellow Taoists, this is the place we're heading to. If any fellow Daoist escapes this calamity, then you can meet up here. Everyone, please take care of yourselves." After that, Zhu Chenghe took the lead and flew toward the place where Mojiao had disappeared. Zhu Chenghe was very fast, but Chen Yi and Qiong Yefeng were not slow either. The two of them also scanned the distance with their divine senses, and an incredulous expression appeared on their faces. Before Zhu Chenghe could throw the jade slip to them, they had already flown into the air, grabbed the jade slip with their hands, and put it into their storage bags without even looking at it. Then, they turned into streaks of light, disregarding the dangers of Ink Shadow Black Forest, and left. Xiao Hua took the jade slips and immediately released his Buddhist thought. However, before his Buddhist thought could reach far, a suffocating feeling came from afar. It was like the momentum of 10,000 horses galloping in the air. Ah! Xiao Hua trembled. He knew that there must be a change in the Mojiao Black Forest. When he released his Buddhist thought for more than 10 miles, he saw that there seemed to be a huge wave in the Black Forest. The black sand was lifted high. Was it more than 10 feet high? Moreover, under the waves of the black sand, many spirit beasts and even spirit birds, and some cultivators were fleeing in panic. While Xiao Hua was watching, 2 cultivators in the late stage of foundation establishment were swallowed by the black sand in the blink of an eye because their flying speed was not fast enough. Moreover, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth in the waves of the black sand was extremely chaotic. Xiao Hua's Buddhist thought could not penetrate it, so he could not see whether the cultivators were dead or alive. The black sand moved very fast, as if following the flow of the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. It rushed several miles in an instant. At this time, the panicked Xie Zhiqian released his divine thought and found the abnormality. Mo Jiao. Why did I encounter something that would not happen in tens of thousands of years? After saying that, he did not even greet Xiao Hua. His figure followed Chen Yi and the others and chased after them. Xiao Hua did not dare to be negligent. His figure also swept up, but he still flew very low, following behind Xie Zhiqian. He flew while observing Mo Jiao. The ink storm was like an ocean wave, surging forward violently. Wherever it went, everything in the Black Forest would be engulfed. Moreover, the ink storm was like a hurricane, stirring up all the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. All the withered branches and leaves in the Black Forest were swept up high into the sky. Xiao Hua observed for a moment and had a plan in his heart. Although Mo Jiao was powerful, his speed was still slower than his bright thunder escape. If he used all his strength, escaping would not be a problem. However, Chen Yi and the others were in front of him. If he ran too fast, it was inevitable that he would be discovered. Therefore, Xiao Hua thought for a moment, and his direction was slightly slanted, flying in another direction. Damn it, the world is really strange. A small foundation establishment cultivator actually ran to the inner layer of the Black Forest. Are you not afraid of being eaten by Mo Jiao? A voice sounded from above Xiao Hua's head. Needless to say, it was the cultivator who lured Mo Jiao here. Xiao Hua did not pay much attention to him. He only turned his head slightly and saw that it was a short and fat gold core cultivator. His face was shriveled and flat, like a rotten persimmon. Moreover, his eyes were extremely small and were embedded in the persimmon, as if they could not be seen. Give me your storage pouch, I will give you a ride. The cultivator looked at Xiao Hua and sneered, with your flying speed, you will be swallowed by Mo Jiao sooner or later. Not only will your true origin be eroded, your storage pouch will also be destroyed. I will show you kindness and give you a ride. If you are fated to escape, it is better than your cultivation being crippled and becoming an ordinary person. Instead of letting others benefit from this storage pouch, why not let me benefit from it? Hee hee. Xiao Hua roughly understood and sneered, that is my business, it has nothing to do with you. Even if I throw my storage pouch here and let other cultivators benefit, I will not give it to a scoundrel who wants to take advantage of the situation. When the cultivator heard this, not only was he not angry, but he laughed instead. Rotten wood can't be carved. You don't understand shit. Didn't I just lead Mo Jiao to your teacher's place? Think with your ass, if your teacher did not fight with Mo Jiao, you would have encountered Mo Jiao long ago, wouldn't you? Didn't you die in Mo Jiao long ago? How can you still talk to me here? Seeing such a shameless cultivator, Xiao Hua sighed inwardly and ignored him. His body tilted and flew in another direction. Why are you flying there? You can only escape by flying straight, the short and fat cultivator said curiously. Then, he swept back with his divine thought and rolled his bean-sized eyes. He rubbed his hands and threw a spell at Xiao Hua. At the same time, his other hand grabbed at the void, trying to scare away the storage pouch in Xiao Hua's eyes. You really don't want to live anymore. Xiao Hua was not as panicked as the short and fat cultivator imagined, nor was he flying around absent-mindedly. His Buddhist sense saw that the cultivator was actually trying to kill him behind his back without a trace of the demeanor of a senior, and he could not help but be furious. His body suddenly stopped in midair and he waved his hand, using the earth condensation technique. Immediately, an oppressive force swarmed from all around the cultivator, squeezing the cultivator tightly. Oh, young man, your temper is not small. The cultivator was not afraid of Xiao Hua's spell at all and only urged the magic power in his hand. He believed that Xiao Hua's magic power was definitely not as deep as his, and definitely not as fast as his spell. However, the instant the cultivator's great confinement art smashed onto Xiao Hua, a burst of brilliant light flickered all over Xiao Hua's body. It was precisely the activation of the protective brilliance. Moreover, just outside the brilliance, a layer of earth-yellow armor suddenly formed. Furthermore, Xiao Hua's figure suddenly shot up, as fast as a messaging talisman. The great confinement technique only smashed into Xiao Hua's lower body, clearly hitting nothing but air. Protective brilliance. The cultivator was stunned, and a bad feeling emerged in his heart. He hurriedly shook his two arms outwards, as if he also wanted to urge the protective brilliance to break free from Xiao Hua's earth condensation technique. Unexpectedly, at this moment, the cultivator suddenly felt a sharp pain in his mind, as if an awl had pierced into his brain. His divine thought involuntarily contracted, and the magic power in his body also went out of control at the same time. Therefore, the cultivator could not help but cry out, "Oh!" His two hands tried to support his head. -8. Chapter 1997. Heh. Xiao Hua sneered. The earth condensation technique had already hit the cultivator. The surrounding earth attribute heaven and earth spiritual chi swarmed over, binding the cultivator tightly. Xiao Hua's figure swept towards the cultivator again. He reached out and pulled down two huge storage bags from the waist of the cultivator, who fell from the air. He turned around and was about to escape. At this moment, Xiao Hua's gaze swept over and saw a green silk ribbon on the cultivator's neck. At this moment, the cultivator was panicking. The protective brilliance around his body flickered as soon as it was suppressed. Xiao Hua's heart stirred. He reached out and pulled out the green silk ribbon. On the green silk ribbon, there was a doll-like doll tied to it. That doll was only the size of a thumb. Its entire body was faintly green. A layer of faintly discernible green seal text appeared from time to time. It seemed to be floating on the outer layer, but also seemed to be hidden inside the doll. Looking at the doll again, its features were clear. Its eyes were tightly closed, and there was a trace of sadness at the corner of its mouth. It seemed to be full of sorrow. Sorcerer puppet. Xiao Hua was stunned. His eyes almost shrank. He almost didn't dare to believe his eyes. However, even if he saw the green seal text, he still didn't dare to believe it. After all, sorcerer puppets were legendary ancient objects. He had only seen them in Huang Yi's imprint. He couldn't be sure. Therefore, Xiao Hua didn't even think and hid the doll in his arms. He didn't even look at the cultivator who fell on the ground. He turned around and fled. The eyes of the cultivator who fell on the ground were filled with regret. Not only for provoking Xiao Hua, but also for his carelessness. He panicked because of his escape. In fact, his cultivation wasn't weaker than Xiao Hua's. It was only because of his carelessness that he felt that dealing with a baby like Xiao Hua didn't require much effort. But he really didn't expect Xiao Hua to have soul stab and earth condensation technique. He didn't care about dealing with Xiao Hua, but Xiao Hua was serious. He used a secret technique right from the start. Who was stronger and who was weaker, naturally it was clear. However, the cultivator simply didn't have much time to regret, nor did he have much time to break through Xiao Hua's earth condensation technique. The ink storm came charging over like it was covering the sky and covering the earth. Countless ink sand hit the cultivator's meridians like it was real, hitting the true essence within the meridians, and the golden core that was the source of the true essence within the dantian. The golden core was originally a faint yellow color, and it revolved in his dantian. However, when a large amount of ink entered the golden core, the outer layer of the golden core was instantly dyed black. Soon after, a layer of fine black powder appeared on the surface of the golden core. When the black powder came into contact with the spirit chi, it immediately formed bubbles. The bubbles quickly burst, layer after layer. As the bubbles burst, the golden core shrank slightly. The cultivator was still struggling with all his might, but after being annihilated by the ink storm, his breath and surroundings were completely filled with the tyrannical ink sand. He was unable to extract the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, and could only use his jindan to activate his mana. But at this moment, his jindan had also been invaded by the ink sand. Not to mention that the vital essence in his meridians had been completely blocked by the ink sand, unable to activate his mana. Even if his meridians were intact, his jindan would not be able to provide vital essence. As a result, the cultivator's face was deathly pale, and he no longer wanted to struggle. However, at this moment, the cultivator's body loosened. Xiao Hua's earth condensation technique was still unable to resist the might of the ink storm, and it collapsed under the might of heaven and earth. The cultivator suddenly rejoiced, and a trace of hope rose in his heart. However, before he could crawl up from the ground, a wind howled, and a piece of black wood as thick as a duck's egg flew through the hurricane, striking the cultivator's temple. The cultivator faintly glanced to the side, not panicking in the slightest. He waved his left hand, and an extremely simple object controlling technique was used, wanting to knock the black wood away. However, he extended his hand, but his mana was gone. His technique was nothing more than a superficial struggle. With a bang, that black wood struck the cultivator's temple, and a wisp of dark red blood flowed down from the cultivator's forehead. The cultivator's body swayed twice, and he fell to the ground, never to crawl up again. A golden core cultivator was killed by a black wood just like that. Xiao Hua took the other party's doll, and threw the two huge storage bags into the space. His figure no longer hesitated, and he flew forward slightly crookedly. However, after flying for half a cup of tea's time, Xiao Hua felt that something was wrong. The amount of ink sand in the air was increasing, and with the agitation of the heaven and earth spiritual qi, the ink sand seemed to be affected. Moreover, as Xiao Hua flew, the surrounding blackwood became thicker, and from time to time, there were some black vines bearing their fangs and brandishing their claws from the blackwood, as if to block Xiao Hua. This is bad. Xiao Hua suddenly realized that he was flying in the wrong direction again. The place where Chen Yi flew to should be outside of the ink cloud black forest, and in order to avoid their eyes and ears, he diverted. Wasn't he flying to the middle of the ink cloud black forest? However, seeing that the ink cloud black forest was becoming more and more violent, and had the power to sweep everything away, Xiao Hua wanted to fly in front of the ink cloud black forest again. My goodness, what should I do now? Xiao Hua's heart trembled slightly. On one hand, he was desperately trying to escape into the depths of the ink cloud black forest, and on the other hand, his mind was spinning like a windmill, trying to find a way to escape. However, after thinking for a long time, Xiao Hua still could not think of a way to escape from the ink cloud black forest even though Mo Bao's momentum and speed were increasing exponentially. Damn it, am I going to be buried in the ink cloud black forest? Xiao Hua sighed in his heart, but at this moment, a ray of light flashed in his heart. Ink cloud. That's right, where did the ink cloud black forest go? I have been in the ink cloud black forest for a long time, but why haven't I seen a single ink cloud black forest? If there is no ink cloud black forest, will it still be a dangerous place? Xiao Hua came to his senses and lowered his head to look at the pitch-black ground. Ha ha ha. They are all underground. Xiao Hua's divine sense could not reach far, so when he used his Buddhist awareness to check, he really saw that under the pitch-black ground, there were many ink cloud black forest that were like hibernating snakes. They curled up into a coil and wrapped themselves with their fleshy wings. Well, the ground can block divine sense, so it should be able to block most of the ink cloud black forest. Since the ink cloud black forest has spread its fleshy wings, the fleshy wings should be able to block a part of the ink cloud black forest. As for the remaining ink cloud black forest, the ink cloud black forest should not be afraid of it. Xiao Hua understood and his heart immediately calmed down. He formed a seal with his hands and used the earth escape technique. His body escaped into the pitch-black ground. However, in just a moment, Xiao Hua flew out from the ground again and said with a smile, I am stupid. The ink cloud black forest is extremely dangerous. Even a gold core stage cultivator has to be careful in fear of being attacked by the ink cloud black forest or other ferocious creatures. Now, because of the ink cloud black forest, all the ferocious creatures have escaped. Before the ink cloud black forest, who would dare not to escape? Isn't this a good time for me to go deep into the ink cloud black forest? If we don't go in now, what are we waiting for? -8. Chapter 1998. Immediately, Xiao Hua took out the maze again and put it on his body. His body stuck close to the ground and flew towards the depths of the black forest. Of course, Xiao Hua was also prepared. The 100 talismans in the rabbit array were already in his hand. He was only waiting for the time when he couldn't escape, then he would go deep into the ground and lay out the array. Xiao Hua's bright thunder escape was indeed powerful. He quickly rushed in front of Mo Bao like a warrior surfing the waves, standing on top of the waves. Those hiding under the ground were not only Mo Jiao and other monsters, but also Gold Core Stage and Nascent Soul Stage cultivators. These cultivators left their spirit sense outside to observe Mo Bao's whereabouts. At this time, they actually saw Xiao Hua's figure that was like a meteor. They couldn't help but be shocked. None of them didn't want to see Xiao Hua's true face. Unfortunately, their spirit sense didn't dare to be too far away. Moreover, Xiao Hua's maze also blocked their spirit sense. Even if they wanted to see, they couldn't. Which expert is this? He actually dares to fly like this in the Mo Jiao Black Forest. And his flying speed is so fast. The cultivators started to guess. Some were spirit-severing stage cultivators, some were nascent soul stage cultivators, and some even guessed that it was the Imperial Thunder Sect. However, they never thought that under the maze, it was just a small Imperial Thunder Sect, and a small Foundation Establishment stage cultivator in the Myriad Thunder Valley. Buzz tilde. It seemed to be the sound of mountains shaking and the earth quaking, coming from the front of Xiao Hua's head. Xiao Hua tried his best to probe out with his Buddhist consciousness, but he could not find any clues. However, Xiao Hua understood in his heart that the ink cloud Black Forest must have produced an ink storm in the depths of the forest and was pushing out in all directions. Therefore, he didn't dare to delay any longer. He formed a seal and drilled into the ground. Moreover, he used all his spirit sense to go as deep as possible. After passing by dozens of Mo Jiao of different sizes, Xiao Hua finally felt a huge force starting to support him. He knew that he had almost reached the deepest part of the earth escape, so he didn't waste any more spirit sense to go down. Instead, he hurriedly threw out the 100 talismans to lay out the rabbit array. Just after Xiao Hua threw out most of the talismans, a feeling of black clouds pressing down on the city rushed over from above. Good, it's still so powerful even though it's so far from the ground. Xiao Hua was flabbergasted. He activated the magic power in his hand and waved it continuously. Finally, as the ink sand fell one after another, he grabbed his hand. The rabbit spell formation was activated one after another and blocked the oppressive aura. However, the formation was only able to block the majority of the ink sand. There was still an extremely small amount of ink sand that was able to penetrate through the gaps in the formation. It was sucked onto Xiao Hua's body. However, at this moment, the ink sand was not much worse than the ink sand that Xiao Hua had encountered at the edge of the ink cloud Black Forest. After entering his meridians, it was absorbed by the yarrow milk. Although Xiao Hua did not release his Buddhist consciousness from the magic circle, he could see the flickering brilliance above the magic circle. It seemed like a lonely lamp in the waves that wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Naturally, he also knew the brutality of the ink violence on the ground. Thus, he sighed and clapped his hand, taking out the doll that looked like a wizard puppet. Although it looks the same as the sorcerer puppet, I can't be sure. Xiao Hua stared at the doll and thought to himself, but this doll is obviously written in green seal script, it must be related to witchcraft. However, that cultivator is only at the peak of the early stage of the Golden Core realm. He has not reached the middle stage of the Golden Core realm. Where did he get the sorcerer puppet? Unfortunately, that cultivator was submerged by the ink violence. Now, I don't know whether he is dead or alive. Humph, such a shameless cultivator. He won't even let go of a small Foundation Establishment cultivator like me. What's the use of keeping him alive in this world? Xiao Hua immediately curled his lips and placed the sorcerer puppet aside. Then, he took out the 2 storage pouches that he had taken from that cultivator from the space. When he opened the storage pouches to take a look, he could not help but be stunned. There were a lot of things in the bag of holding, but there were no spirit stones, no medicinal pills, and no spirit herbs. There were only a lot of broken jade slips, some worn-out magic tools, magic treasures, and some inexplicable things. I understand. Xiao Hua slapped his forehead and said with a smile, "This guy is the same as the cultivator abandoned by the heavens. He came to the ink cloud Black Forest to look for cultivation techniques or magic treasure remains. It's just that this guy is really amazing." He actually collected so many things. Presumably, that sorcerer puppet was also found by him in the ink cloud Black Forest. Since that cultivator said that all storage pouches cannot escape the ink violence, then the ink sand must be able to corrode storage pouches. These things cannot be left in storage pouches. They must be exposed in the ink cloud Black Forest. Moreover, the ink sand will attack at any time. It is impossible for all magic tools and magic treasures to be intact. However, this cultivator is self-taught. He hid the sorcerer puppet close to his body. Xiao Hua glanced at the doll again and said with a smile, "It's just a pity that he doesn't know the method to refine the sorcerer puppet. It is useless for him to keep it. On the contrary, it is giving this young master a life." Xiao Hua had seen the introduction and method to refine the sorcerer puppet from Huang Yi's ghost cultivation inheritance. He knew that this sorcerer puppet was an object refined by ancient witchcraft. It was incomparably miraculous. After refining it, it could be kept close to the body and could die once in place of the cultivator. As for why it was like this and how it was refined, in this day and age where witchcraft had long been lost, who would know? Even ghost cultivators with hundreds of thousands or millions of years of inheritance did not know. Hey! 2 white bones. Xiao Hua scanned the area with his divine sense, and he saw 2 extremely long and thick white bones among the pile of junk. Xiao Hua clapped his hands and took out the white bones from his storage pouch. He held them in his hands and observed them carefully. The white bones were extremely thick. Xiao Hua's 2 hands could not close together. Moreover, the white bones were extremely long. Xiao Hua was already tall and thin, but the white bones were actually more than twice as tall as him. Good heavens, these 2 white bones are actually compatible with the giant head in the space. Xiao Hua's heart stirred. The true samadhi fire in his hands was ignited and burned the 2 white bones. As Xiao Hua expected, not long after, strings of tadpole-like green seal characters emerged from the white bones. They floated in the air for a moment and then flew into the space with Xiao Hua's mind. They slowly revolved around reverse light. Thus, pieces of green seal characters and pictures were reflected in Xiao Hua's mind. After the time of 2 meals, the green seal characters gradually dimmed and disappeared. Everything was stored in Xiao Hua's mind. Alas, even with the ghost cultivator's inheritance, this young master still does not understand these green seal characters. Xiao Hua sighed. Moreover, according to the ghost cultivator's inheritance, this talisman curse technique came from the immemorial witchcraft. It's just that it's much more shallow. I wonder when this young master will be able to understand these green seal characters. Thinking of the green seal characters, Xiao Hua remembered the Confucian words on the tortoise shell. Those were the inscriptions on the armor, which also originated from the immemorial era. However, they were used by Confucian cultivators to record cultivation techniques. Looking at the vivid green seal characters, Xiao Hua sighed again. He swept his mind again and the 2 white bones flew into the space. Sure enough, once the white bones entered the space, ka-cha-cha sounds of thunder could be heard. The white bones automatically flew to the bottom of the previous white bones and lay down. They looked just like the calf bones of a giant. This young master understands now. Seeing the invisible connection between the white bones and the green lightning wrapped around the white bones, Xiao Hua smiled. This is the skeleton of an immemorial celestial. It's even related to lightning. If we can gather the skeleton of this celestial, maybe something fun will happen. As for what would be fun, Xiao Hua scratched his head and couldn't think of anything. Below the white bones, the lightning beast cub seemed to still be in a deep slumber. The lightning ball on the white bones also wrapped around it. Moreover, from time to time, lightning would be born from the white clouds in the air, striking the lightning beast cub. No matter what, this little cub can live. Xiao Hua smiled and looked at the poisoned beauty-retaining grass. In this space, the beast poison seemed to have stopped, and the beauty-retaining grass had a strong vitality. Although Xiao Hua didn't expel the poison from the beauty-retaining grass, the originally dead beauty-retaining grass regained its vitality at this time. Moreover, it was fighting against the beast poison step by step. If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't have time now, Xiao Hua wouldn't dare to take the beauty-retaining grass out of the space. He was afraid that the beast poison would wreak havoc again. If he didn't have the confidence to expel the poison, Xiao Hua would definitely take the beauty-retaining grass out of the space and see if he could use a secret method to save the beauty-retaining grass. Thinking about it, which female cultivator wouldn't like a spiritual grass that could make a person stay young forever? Thinking about it again, even the burial flower manor only had 4 stalks. If he planted them in the space, then the spirit stones, TSK, it wouldn't be any worse than a jade mine. Thinking about it, Xiao Hua unconsciously licked his dry lips. It's better not to think too much. Xiao Hua hurriedly pulled his consciousness out of the space and flipped through the ghost cultivator's inheritance. He carefully looked at the content of the shaman puppet and also looked at the details of the refining method of the shaman puppet. Oh, so this shaman puppet isn't omnipotent. The first time Xiao Hua looked at it, he didn't look at it carefully. Now that he looked at it word by word, he understood some deeper things. The power of the shaman puppet is related to the cultivation of the person refining it. It should be able to resist the attack of a cultivator who is 1 level higher than that. If there is more, the shaman puppet can't replace it. There's also the environment used, the magic tool used to kill it, and so on. The more Xiao Hua looked, the smaller the surprise in his heart. But thinking about it, if the shaman puppet had such great power, it could directly replace the death of a cultivator. If the almighty cultivator refined a few more shaman puppets, then wouldn't they be able to rest easy? Even if it was lightning tribulation, they wouldn't have to be afraid. Lightning tribulation, magic tools that aren't part of the 5 elements, they can't be replaced by shaman puppets. Xiao Hua looked and laughed. The requirements are getting more and more stringent. Oh! What are magic tools that aren't part of the 5 elements? Xiao Hua suddenly paused and looked forward. His eyes turned and he seemed to understand something. He thought to himself, in this inheritance, it only talks about magic tools. It doesn't talk about magic treasures or spirit treasures. It's probably because in ancient times, there were only magic tools. But after it reached the Dao sect, it started to divide them into different categories and increase the number of magic tools. However, I wonder what are magic tools that are part of the 5 elements. That's right, my great wisdom heavy sword, isn't it like this? Xiao Hua suddenly came to a realization. -8. Chapter 1999. When he thought about how he'd finally found the origin of the great wisdom sword, Xiao Hua couldn't help but be overjoyed. He disregarded the refining of the shaman puppet and carefully looked through the inheritance of the ghost cultivators. After an hour, Xiao Hua frowned and flicked his hand, taking out the great wisdom sword. The ghost cultivator's inheritance didn't say too much about magic tools that aren't part of the 5 elements. It only vaguely pointed out a few places. Xiao Hua was a bit distressed. I only know that this kind of magic tool can't be refined using ordinary refining methods. It can't be contaminated with items of the 5 elements. Although the towering flame can be used to refine tools, it clearly belongs to the fire of the 5 elements. It definitely can't be used to refine the great wisdom sword. The true samadhi fire is too gentle and isn't suitable for refining tools. Could it be that I have to use that spiritual fire? But thinking about how using just a bit of spiritual fire would exhaust half of his cultivation, Xiao Hua immediately became dejected. Damn it, if I want to refine the great wisdom sword, I'm afraid I'll have to use 10 times, or even 100 times my current cultivation. I really don't know when I'll be able to refine it. Moreover, what kind of magic tool can I refine with the great wisdom sword? Xiao Hua's mind was active again. The great wisdom sword was originally a sword embryo. Presumably, it will be refined into a sword. But it can't be controlled by divine sense, so how can it fly? It can only be held in the hand. If it's held in the hand, how can it be used? I don't know any sword techniques that can be held in the hand. Usually, I only use it as a staff. After all, there's still a heavenly staff technique in my memories. Thinking here, Xiao Hua raised his brows again, seeming to have thought of something. He had no choice but to dig out the ghost cultivator's inheritance again. There was no other reason. The ghost cultivator's inheritance was really too much. It wasn't Xiao Hua's own memories. When he used it, he could only find it on the spot. After a moment, a trace of a smile appeared on Xiao Hua's face. He opened his eyes and said with a smile, "5 elements wishful heavenly staff. Isn't this the weapon you prepared for me?" It turned out that in the ghost cultivator's inheritance, there was a staff-shaped magic tool used by immemorial celestials. Its size could be controlled by the heart, and it didn't belong to the 5 elements. Moreover, it was shockingly heavy. Wasn't this the staff that Xiao Hua was thinking? It's a pity that the inheritance only recorded this kind of magic weapon. It didn't record how to refine it or what materials were used to refine it. Xiao Hua scratched his chin with his index finger and said with a smile, "Presumably, with the spiritual bodies of ghosts, they are also afraid of this 5 elements wishful heaven cudgel. Even if they knew, they wouldn't dare to record it down. Forget it, a celestial being's magical artifact isn't something I've seen before. Who knows, it might even be a primordial forging technique. That's something that only almighty beings possess. I'd better not covet it." Thinking about this, Xiao Hua was somewhat happy and somewhat melancholy as he put away the Great Wisdom Sword. With a wave of his hand, the Great Wisdom Sword was held in his hand. Immediately, he closed his eyes and carefully went through the method of refining the Great Wisdom Sword. Then, he used his thumb to point at the mark of the Great Wisdom Eye on his forehead and shouted, "Open." As Xiao Hua spat out the needle eye, the mark of the Great Wisdom Eye between his eyebrows gradually appeared. After waiting for a moment, Xiao Hua closed his eyes and urged the soul cultivation technique. The soul strands extended out from the Great Wisdom Eye. Thread by thread, circle by circle, they wrapped around the Great Wisdom Sword according to the method of refining the Great Wisdom Sword. Following the strange winding method of the soul strands, the green seal characters on the Great Wisdom Sword began to slowly appear. One by one, they lit up, as if Xiao Hua was lighting them up one after another. When all the green seal characters lit up, Xiao Hua's soul strands began to fling out again. Each strand of soul strands touched a green seal character. Ao tilde tilde Xiao Hua only felt the place where his soul strands were connected to tremble. For some reason, there was an indescribable feeling of comfort, or perhaps it was a strange feeling. It was as if he had somewhat understood the meaning of the green seal characters, but if he were to say it out loud, it would be extremely difficult. "I understand." Xiao Hua was overjoyed. So this is how the green seal characters are practiced. It's definitely not the Great Wisdom Sword or the Great Wisdom Sword. The green seal characters themselves have the ability to shock the heavens and make ghosts and gods weep. So that's how it is. While thinking, Xiao Hua carefully pulled out his soul strands again. One by one, he touched all the green seal characters. However, what surprised him was that although there were many green seal characters, there were only 3 that could cause his soul to tremble. Could it be? Xiao Hua, while arranging the green seal characters according to the records, secretly guessed, there are only 3 useful green seal characters. And the green seal characters are all formed by these 3 green seal characters. Or perhaps, I can feel these 3 green seal characters, but I can't feel the others. Just as he was thinking about it, all of the green seal characters had finished assembling and were floating in the air, forming a slightly larger green seal character. It should be like this. Looking at this green seal character that was extremely similar to the other green seal characters, Xiao Hua thought to himself. Then, without hesitation, he opened his mouth and spat a mouthful of essence blood on the green seal character. The green seal character suddenly emitted a brilliant golden light. Then, Xiao Hua only felt a slight dizziness in his head. The green seal character returned to its faint green appearance and completely covered the shaman puppet. As the green seal text fell, the entire shaman puppet also emitted a green light, which disappeared in a flash. Although the shaman puppet's appearance didn't change, Xiao Hua could clearly see that the shaman puppet's mouth was curled up, revealing a slight smile. Seeing this smile, Xiao Hua's face also revealed a smile. The shaman puppet couldn't be used infinitely. Each shaman puppet could only be used 3 times. Since Xiao Hua succeeded in refining it and revealed a smiling face, it meant that the shaman puppet could still be used. The crying face from before must be the reason that cultivator didn't know how to refine it. I wonder who that cultivator is. His storage bag isn't at his waist. Xiao Hua smiled and thought, presumably, everything in his storage bag has become the prey of others in the future. After refining the voodoo puppet, Xiao Hua also found a silk ribbon and hung the voodoo puppet in front of his neck, placing it together with the phoenix auspicious jade talisman. Then, he slightly released his Buddhist consciousness to observe the Mo Bao outside the formation. Just as Xiao Hua expected, the Mo Bao outside the formation was still rampant and showed no signs of stopping. Fine, then I'll use this free time to cultivate more. Xiao Hua didn't regret it. What he lacked now was time. Wasn't it good to have free time? Immediately, Xiao Hua closed his eyes and comprehended the mysteries of the soul spike. That ghost cultivator's soul spike was indeed powerful. It directly pierced into the Niwen Palace. It was definitely the nemesis of divine sense. Previously, when Xiao Hua killed the short and fat cultivator, he also didn't expect it to be so powerful. He even prepared the dream execution, true samadhi fire, and a few other moves. However, once the soul spike was used, it immediately showed a miraculous effect. All of the other moves were useless. Therefore, Xiao Hua very much liked this method that could restrain a Jindan cultivator's divine ability. -8. Chapter 2000. Time passed quickly, and in the blink of an eye, more than 30 days had passed. The ink storm outside the formation began to weaken, and Xiao Hua's soul thorn had made great progress. Especially after the first use, Xiao Hua combined it with practical use, and comprehended more. After another 20 days, the ink storm outside the magic formation finally calmed down, and no more ink sand seeped in from the floors of the magic formation. However, in the past 50 days of cultivation, in Xiao Hua's Jinyuan, a lot of ink sand was wrapped around the earth crystal yarrow milk. At first, Xiao Hua didn't care, because the amount of ink sand was small, and he spent all his energy on comprehending the soul thorn, so he rarely refined the earth crystal yarrow milk. However, in the last few days, when the soul thorn was completed and he began to refine the earth crystal yarrow milk, he discovered a great secret. Because this earth crystal yarrow milk was wrapped in ink sand, the ink sand seemed to be able to corrode the earth crystal yarrow milk. However, the earth crystal yarrow milk was an extremely condensed form of earth power. Therefore, the ink sand's corrosive effect was almost negligible. However, because of this negligible corrosive effect, the solid earth crystal yarrow milk was turned into gaseous or liquid earth power. This effect was much better than Xiao Hua's earth crystal yarrow milk. Because Xiao Hua could directly refine the spiritual energy, he didn't need to face the solid earth crystal yarrow milk. Of course, when the ink sand corroded the earth crystal yarrow milk, the earth element spiritual energy was also damaged, but in front of the massive amount of earth crystal yarrow milk, it was still insignificant. Haha. Xiao Hua discovered this phenomenon, and he couldn't help but be overjoyed. His cultivation speed suddenly increased by more than 3 times. Withdraw. Xiao Hua saw that the ink storm outside the formation was gone, so he stretched out his hand and grabbed the air. His 5 fingers flashed with a faint light, and hundreds of talismans were instantly collected in his hand. Ah! After Xiao Hua withdrew the formation, he scanned with his divine sense, and was stunned again. He saw that he was surrounded by 4 or 5 Mojiao, which were 3 times bigger than the Mojiao he encountered before. Each of them wrapped their wings around their bodies, and pairs of blue eyes stared at him. You're courting death. Xiao Hua saw that 2 Mojiao were unwilling to be left out, and their bodies twisted and were about to pounce on him. He sneered and performed the soul thorn technique, stabbing at the 2 Mojiao. Roar! Roar! The 2 Mojiao opened their mouths and rolled on the ground. Their eyes were filled with fear. Since you're here, don't leave. Xiao Hua had been eyeing Mojiao for a long time. He knew that they were more precious than any green python. If he did not get at least 1 or 2 Mojiao in the Black Forest, how could he say that he had been here before? Then, Xiao Hua waved his hands and cast 2 earth condensation spells at Mojiao. The earth condensation spell had an advantage in this underground area where the earth spiritual energy was abundant. While Mojiao was rolling on the ground, He did not put up any resistance and was immediately restrained by a layer of yellow light. Amid her, Xiao Hua sighed. He was hesitant to kill Mo Jiao. However, after thinking for a while, he still took out his spirit storage bag and stored the 2 ink horseshoes. Don't kill if you can. After that, Xiao Hua scanned the area with his divine sense again. He found that the Mo Jiao, who had been eyeing him covetously just a moment ago, now had a look of horror in their eyes. The black brilliance on the surface of their bodies flickered, and they slowly retreated. Judging from their cautious looks, it seemed that they were afraid of being discovered by Xiao Hua. However, they were also afraid that they could not escape from Xiao Hua's evil clutches. They are also afraid of the strong and bully the weak. Xiao Hua snorted coldly. Then, he jumped up and flew toward the ground. Although there was no more ink storm in the depths of the ground, there was still a lot of ink storm near the surface. Xiao Hua flew for a while and then stopped. After estimating the amount of ink storm was enough, he sat down cross-legged and began to refine the earth crystal yarrow milk. After flying for more than 20 days, Xiao Hua suddenly found that there were many Mo Jiao corpses near the surface. They must have been killed in the ink storm. Xiao Hua was overjoyed. He released the 2 Mo Jiao from his spirit storage bag and collected the Mo Jiao's corpses. The harvest was far beyond Xiao Hua's expectation. He had collected more than 1,000 Mo Jiao's corpses. I'm rich. I'm rich. Xiao Hua, who had never seen the world, released his divine sense while he was underground. At the same time, he kept Mo Jiao, who had been scanned by his divine sense, into his space. He was beaming with joy, unable to close his mouth. Yes, Zhu Chenghe, Chen Yi, and the other 2 joined forces to kill 2 Mo Jiao, but they failed. However, he had collected more than 1,000 Mo Jiao in just half a day. If this was not a fortune, what was it? As for what the Mo Jiao could be used for and how to make a fortune, Xiao Hua, a miser, did not care about it. As long as he could get what he wanted, this was the golden rule that Xiao Hua followed in his heart. Where did this kid come from? How dare you steal my things? Xiao Hua was excited about his harvest. Suddenly, he felt a spirit sense sweep over him from above. A nascent soul realm cultivator's spirit sense had firmly locked onto him. Damn it! Xiao Hua was shocked. Without thinking, he immediately flew underground, ignoring the Mo Jiao's corpses that were close to him. Still want to run? Damn it, I took a risk to dive underground and searched for a long time, but I couldn't find any Mo Jiao. It turns out that they were all taken by a little thief like you. A similarly tall and thin nascent soul realm cultivator appeared in the distance. His body flashed with a yellow light as he chased after Xiao Hua at an extremely fast speed. Xiao Hua's eyes turned as he flew. He used the sky-pilfering sun-swapping technique and gradually changed his appearance. He did not want to be remembered by a nascent soul realm cultivator and be hunted down all day long. Heh! The nascent soul realm cultivator saw that Xiao Hua was diving deeper and deeper, and his earth escape talisman was gradually reaching its limit. He couldn't help but be shocked. With a wave of his hand, he used the earth congealing technique and quickly smashed it towards Xiao Hua. Damn it! This guy is too sinister. Xiao Hua felt that the earth chi behind his spirit sense was becoming more and more stagnant. He cursed in his heart and no longer dared to dive deeper. He steeled his heart and rushed towards the surface again. Hey! Why are you flying up again? The nascent soul realm cultivator was stunned, and then he sneered. He knew that at this time, there was still Mo Jiao above the black forest. The Mo Jiao covered the sky and raged in the air. Even a nascent soul realm cultivator like him didn't dare to casually go out, for fear that the nascent soul in his dantian would be covered by the Mo Jiao's spirit sense and choke it to death. How could a little early foundation establishment realm cultivator like Xiao Hua survive? However, this little cultivator's face is very unfamiliar. He's around 50 years old, but he can cultivate to the early foundation establishment realm. And I don't know where he got the Earth Escape talisman. The quality is better than mine. Which sect is he from? Who cares which sect he's from? I'll kill him and the Mo Jiao in his storage bag is mine. I took a risk to come out and just found 2 Mo Jiao. One of them was thrown away by that brat. He must have some more in his storage bag. But then, the nascent soul realm cultivator was bewildered. Xiao Hua first dived down and then flew up. His entire body flew into the shape of a valley in front of him. The time and distance he took to do so was obviously longer than his own. Admittedly, he had rushed over from afar, but he had already escaped for such a long time. He should have caught up with Xiao Hua long ago. However, in his spirit sense, the distance between him and Xiao Hua didn't seem to have shortened at all. Could it be that a nascent soul realm enemy who hid his cultivation has set up a trap ahead? The nascent soul realm cultivator was somewhat hesitant. After all, Xiao Hua's performance as a foundation establishment realm cultivator was too astonishing. It didn't conform to common sense. Just as the nascent soul realm cultivator was stunned for a moment, Xiao Hua had already reached the same height as him. Moreover, he didn't stop and continued to escape upward. Although there are many nascent soul realm cultivators in the Dawn Rain continent, I can recognize most of them. This brat. The nascent soul realm cultivator changed his mind and clapped his hand again. A shiny talisman appeared in his hand. It was the Earth Escape talisman. When he clapped his hand, the dim yellow light around his body lit up again. The black ground of the Mojiao Black Forest is too strange. There are too many Mo sand. Ordinary 5 elements escape technique can't be used. If I didn't find this Earth Escape talisman, I wouldn't have been able to escape to such a deep place. If I hid on the ground like others, I would be able to escape the Mojiao, but I would also be able to obtain Mojiao's corpse. Thinking of Mojiao's corpse, the nascent soul realm cultivator's eyes lit up again. This Mojiao's magical use is something I found in an ancient book. I still have to test it. If it can be used, wouldn't my magic power increase by leaps and bounds? Mid-nascent soul realm is just around the corner. Besides, if I don't get more Mojiao's corpse now, wouldn't this Earth Escape talisman be wasted? The nascent soul realm cultivator's divine sense had already scanned the surroundings. He didn't see any Mojiao's corpse, so he could only target Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua was too petty. If you left more than 10 Mojiao's corpse here, would the nascent soul realm cultivator chase you? Stay here. After the nascent soul realm cultivator finished thinking, he didn't hesitate anymore. He rubbed his hands together and released a dark green light. As the nascent soul realm cultivator waved his hands, the light turned into dozens of rope-like lights and chased after Xiao Hua at an incomparable speed. Damn it! Xiao Hua released his divine sense. He had already sensed the magic power in the light that was causing the true yuan in his meridians to stagnate. He couldn't help but curse inwardly, I'm just a foundation establishment realm cultivator. Is it worth it to chase after me like this? Yes, although Xiao Hua had already mastered the bright thunder escape technique, he was only a gold core realm cultivator. Speaking of which, his flying speed was similar to a late gold core realm cultivator. It was far from being comparable to a nascent soul realm cultivator. Fortunately, he was now underground. The nascent soul realm cultivator used the Earth Escape talisman that he was not familiar with. If he was in midair, he would have already been captured by the nascent soul realm cultivator. Run for a while more. Xiao Hua's divine sense had already touched a lot of Mojiao, and he also felt the ferocity of Mo Bao on the ground. Although he didn't know whether he would live or die if he went deep into Mo Bao's body, he knew that as long as he fell into the hands of this nascent soul realm cultivator, his soul would definitely be searched. -8. Chapter 2001. Xiao Hua had already pushed his magic power to the limit. The true essence in his body rapidly rotated, and magic power rushed to the surface of Xiao Hua's body as if it didn't need spirit stones. However, cultivation was cultivation, and there was no shortcut. Although Xiao Hua had many secret manuals, in front of absolute strength, everything was nothing. Absolute nothingness. The rope-like radiance immediately flew to Xiao Hua's feet. Xiao Hua's mind was filled with thoughts. Spiritual fire, flying sword, true samadhi fire, soul thorn, and so on, seemed to be able to resist one or two of them. However, the radiance controlled the surrounding spiritual energy, completely killing any of his delusions. Xiao Hua understood that the spiritual fire might be able to break through this radiance, but what about after 2 spiritual fires? Rather than that, it was better to keep it a secret. At this time, the more secret techniques he had, the more he would attract a fatal disaster. Zilolo. Just as Xiao Hua gave up resisting, the radiance wrapped around Xiao Hua's feet. In an instant, the magic power in his feet was frozen. Moreover, the radiance followed Xiao Hua's body, and all of his magic power was incomparably stagnant. Even if Xiao Hua activated the dragonization art, it had no effect. So it's a foundation establishment, baby. The nascent soul cultivator in the distance snorted. His previous vigilance was completely gone. After all, Xiao Hua's methods were not the reaction of a nascent soul cultivator, or even a golden core cultivator. However, at this time, from behind the nascent soul cultivator, there was a roar. Although it was much weaker than Mo Bao's, it was still incomparably strong. Together with a furious divine sense, it rushed straight towards the nascent soul cultivator. Ah! The nascent soul cultivator's divine sense swept back and was immediately shocked. He saw a 3-jong thick and several jong long giant Mo Bao flapping its huge wings and flying towards the nascent soul cultivator. Giant Mo Bao? The nascent soul cultivator was overjoyed. At this time, he couldn't care less about Xiao Hua in front of him. His figure suddenly flew up, and while dodging the Mo Bao, he rubbed his hands together, and rays of light flew towards the giant Mo Bao. Unfortunately, the giant Mo Bao flapped its wings, and rays of black sand flew over, blocking the rays of light. At the same time, it opened its mouth, and balls of black air flew over like small fish blowing bubbles. These bubbles were bursting and melting the multicolored light. Seeing this, the nascent soul cultivator was somewhat discouraged. The giant ink centipede's body was too huge, and the black skin on the surface of its body had the characteristic of restraining the ink sand, so it was not afraid of the cultivator's magic. Although it was not difficult for the nascent soul cultivator to kill the giant ink centipede in the air of the ink centipede black forest, it would be somewhat difficult to do so on the ground. Just as the nascent soul cultivator slapped his forehead and was about to summon his Dharma treasure, an unpleasant sound rang out from beneath his feet. The nascent soul cultivator scanned the area with his divine sense, and his face unconsciously turned ugly. Not far from his feet, a dozen or so giant ink puppets emerged from the ground. They flapped their wings and flew toward the cultivator. Damn it, why didn't I notice it just now? The nascent soul realm cultivator regretted his decision. However, he knew that Mo Jiao was a ferocious creature of the earth element. It was not easy for him to be discovered by a cultivator's divine sense if he hid underground. Let's go. The nascent soul cultivator made up his mind and flew towards Xiao Hua. In his heart, he was still thinking about those Mo Jiao corpses that might exist, but in fact, they really do exist. However, as soon as he moved, Xiao Hua's figure was even faster. He scuttled to the ground like a fleeing rabbit. How can this guy move again? The nascent soul cultivator was slightly stunned. Obviously, the ink sand from the giant ink centipede had blown onto Xiao Hua's body. Under the corrosion of the ink sand and Xiao Hua's enormous strength, the nascent soul cultivator's confinement Dharma treasure had just been broken free. The nascent soul cultivator rubbed his hands again without hesitation, wanting to confine Xiao Hua. However, at this moment, the ink sand from the dozen or so giant ink centipede flew toward him. The nascent soul cultivator did not dare to not use a Dharma treasure to avoid it. When he dodged the huge amount of ink sand and chased after Xiao Hua again, Xiao Hua had already fled far away. This guy is definitely up to something. The nascent soul cultivator naturally would not let Xiao Hua go. Seeing that Xiao Hua was still quite a distance away from the ground, he waved his hand again. A rope-like Dharma treasure flashed with a brilliant brilliance and was about to attack Xiao Hua. However, at this moment, the nascent soul cultivator's body began to flicker with an earth-yellow brilliance. The Earth Escape talisman seemed to be losing its effect. Damn it! The nascent soul cultivator couldn't help but curse inwardly. He stopped channeling his magic power and reached out to take out another talisman. By the time he placed the talisman on himself and was about to unleash his magic treasure, the dozen or so ink sand stream cultivators once again charged at him from all direction. Go! The nascent soul cultivator was furious. He pointed his finger and the Dharma treasure flew like a spirit snake toward the giant ink centipede closest to him. His figure swayed and he actually disappeared from his original position. In a moment, he reappeared about 10 jong away. However, when he reappeared, the nascent soul cultivator's face was somewhat abnormal. Moreover, the Earth Escape Talisman's brilliance had dimmed a bit. Seeing that his Dharma treasure was being pushed up high by the giant ink centipede's Dharma treasure and was unable to do anything, the nascent soul cultivator slapped his forehead and instantly released his pressure. Not only did it rush toward the giant ink centipede, it also pressed down on Xiao Hua. However, when Xiao Hua's figure was slightly sluggish, the nascent soul cultivator's divine sense suddenly felt a piercing pain like a nail. Ouch! The nascent soul cultivator could not help but exclaim in a low voice. He looked at Xiao Hua in disbelief. After a slight sluggishness, his figure once again shot up. Then, he endured the pain and spread out his divine sense. Strange. Seeing that there was no one nearby and only a dozen or so giant ink centipedes eyeing him covetously, the nascent soul cultivator unconsciously narrowed his eyes and looked at Xiao Hua. Could it be that this little cultivator's body still has some secret technique? Since he had this kind of judgment, the nascent soul cultivator would not let Xiao Hua go. He pointed his finger and the Dharma treasure once again flashed with brilliance and flew toward Xiao Hua. While he was dealing with the giant ink centipede, he also flew toward Xiao Hua. It's hard to escape this calamity. Seeing the Dharma treasure flying closer and the surrounding spiritual chi of heaven and earth being completely controlled, Xiao Hua cursed in his heart. He opened his mouth and the scarlet spiritual fire slightly revolved in the air, turning into a thin thread and wrapping around the rope. Hiss! With a light sound, the brilliance on the rope flickered. The rope was like a dying frozen snake, stopping in midair. Hiss! The nascent soul cultivator was shocked. He did not expect that Xiao Hua would actually be able to injure his Dharma treasure. At the same time, the nascent soul cultivator was furious. Yes, he was really furious. In his divine sense, he had already seen that the Dharma treasure was almost completely destroyed. If he wanted to repair it, he did not know how much energy and materials he would have to spend. The nascent soul cultivator slapped his forehead. A large hand appeared from the top of his head and directly grabbed at Xiao Hua. -8. Chapter 2002. When the hand reached out from the nascent soul cultivator's head, it was only a few feet long. Then, as it soared, it sucked in the surrounding spiritual energy. When it was not far from Xiao Hua, it had already grown to 10 feet long. Of course, Xiao Hua had seen this long ago. He was trying his best to escape above his head, but when the giant hand came down, the surrounding space suddenly gave birth to a kind of force that Xiao Hua couldn't resist. Not only did the true essence in Xiao Hua's meridians come to a standstill, unable to flow in the slightest, but even his body was grabbed, unable to move in the slightest. Forget it. Xiao Hua's expression was normal. He naturally knew that the nascent soul cultivator's methods were endless. He only wanted to sneak out of the ground. Being captured alive was not out of Xiao Hua's expectations. Moreover, at this time, the nascent soul cultivator's hand was quite powerful. It flashed with a faint green color. Not far away, the dozen or so giant ink puppets attacking the cultivator hesitated and stopped. Let's see where you can run to, the nascent soul cultivator sneered. He urged his magic power to escape and capture Xiao Hua. Coincidentally, with a loud woo sound, a huge storm of ink sand suddenly appeared on the surface of the earth where there were already some aftershocks of the ink storm. It came rushing down from the surface of the earth. Swish, swish, swish. Countless ink storms quickly washed over the nascent soul cultivator's hand. The nascent soul cultivator did not dare to be negligent. He slapped his hand and a dark green ring flew out from his storage bag. A thick layer of brilliance completely covered him. At this time, the nascent soul cultivator looked at Xiao Hua in disbelief. Xiao Hua's body actually moved, although it was only a slight movement. Then, he saw Xiao Hua spit out a red spark. This time, the spark turned into a thin line and burned Xiao Hua's body. Xiao Hua's body flashed with little sparks, as if he was completely ignited by the spark. Looking at Xiao Hua again, he raised his hands and took out two huge demonic hammers. He crazily hammered his body for a while. What caused the nascent soul cultivator to be dumbstruck was that after Xiao Hua's crazy actions, his entire body broke free from the giant hand like a fish. Like a moth flying into a flame, he threw himself into the ink storm that was once again swarming over without hesitation. Is there something wrong with this cultivator's brain? The nascent soul cultivator was stunned. I just want to take Mo Zhao's corpse from him. I don't necessarily want to kill him. How could he commit suicide like this? Inside his storage bag, could there be an earth-shattering, unspeakable secret? He actually risked his life to charge into Mo Bao's territory, where even nascent soul cultivators don't dare to enter. He didn't want me to capture him, but as the nascent soul cultivator saw the ink swarm violently rushing towards his hand once more, he didn't dare to be negligent. He quickly retracted his hand, but at the same time, dozens of giant ink swarm pounced towards him once more, vowing that they wouldn't let him off. Damn it. All I did was take Mo Zhao's corpse. Why are all of you so desperate? That guy was so reckless just now. Did he take dozens of them? Why don't you go and vent your anger on him? Why are you looking for me? The nascent soul cultivator didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He understood that Mo Zhao was a ferocious beast. Once a Mo Zhao died, its corpse would be devoured by other Mo Zhao. This time, he didn't know how many Mo Zhao had died in the ink swarm. It was a good opportunity for these giant Mo Zhao to grow. It was precisely because of the corpse in his storage bag that the giant Mo Zhao coveted it. But the problem was, why didn't these giant Mo Zhao chase after Xiao Hua? Could it be that I've wronged that guy? The nascent soul cultivator didn't want to waste his magic power. While escaping from the giant Mo Zhao, he thought. Unfortunately, even if the nascent soul cultivator was 100 times smarter, he would never be able to guess the number of Mo Zhao's corpses piled up like a mountain in Xiao Hua's space. Yes, this was the real reason why the giant Mo Zhao chased after the nascent soul cultivator. Xiao Hua, who broke free from the nascent soul cultivator's shackles, was now like a tiny little bird in the ocean waves. He was lifted out from the ground by the ink swarm. In a situation where he struggled to no avail, he had no choice but to fly along with the waves of the ink swarm. The omnipresent ink swarm invaded Xiao Hua's physical body, Dharma body, meridians, blood vessels, and other places. In a short moment, Xiao Hua's meridians were blocked. The ink swarm also gathered at the 13,200 million points of his physical body and Dharma body. Moreover, as the ink swarm increased, it also became bigger. Damn it! Xiao Hua felt the changes in his body. Naturally, he knew how powerful it was. He tried to urge his magic power, but only a sliver of it could be used. It was like trying to put out a burning cart of firewood with a cup of water. Helpless, Xiao Hua could only use the ethereal steps. He was barely able to maintain a slight balance in the ink swarm. With a wong sound, a thick black wood flew out from Xiao Hua's side and directly smashed towards his waist. Looking at the strength of the black wood, it should be at least 1,000 catties. At this moment, Xiao Hua, who did not have any magic power to protect his body, was hit by the black wood. He would definitely lose his life like the gold core old man from before. However, how could Xiao Hua be such an ordinary cultivator? With a wave of his hand, he took out the devil hammer and waved it slightly. With a catcher sound, the thick black wood was broken into two pieces. The broken black wood brushed past Xiao Hua's body and frantically flew to other places. Just as Xiao Hua took out the devil hammer and his entire body landed, a bright light suddenly flashed in his mind. This devil hammer is so heavy, but it actually did not smash the black wood into pieces. This black wood, its texture is definitely not ordinary. Xiao Hua came to a realization. Moreover, even Mo Zhao hid under the black forest to hide from Mo Zhao. What about the black wood? It has no legs, where could it hide? How could it not be destroyed by the ink swarm? Thinking of this, Xiao Hua raised his head and looked at the nearby black wood, which was already as big as a wall. Without any hesitation, he walked over to her. At this moment, the ink swarm was very fierce. The whistling wind blew away the branches and leaves of the black wood. Xiao Hua held the incomparably heavy devil hammer and his entire body swayed in the ink swarm. Fortunately, it was only a few steps. Xiao Hua waved his hand and the devil hammer returned to his space. In an instant, his body was blown up by the ink swarm and he directly pounced on the black wood in front of him. Seeing that the matter was settled, Xiao Hua tried his best to urge the little bit of magic power he had left and used the wood escape technique. Xiao Hua's body flashed with a light green brilliance and he disappeared into the black wood. Once he entered the black wood, Xiao Hua felt as if he was in a different world. The entire world was peaceful. However, Xiao Hua did not have any leisure mood at this moment. He even rejoiced that he managed to escape. Instead, he hurriedly used his inner vision to check his meridians. At this moment, Xiao Hua's meridians were completely filled with black sand. All of his meridians were blocked and there was not a trace of true essence. Of course, Xiao Hua used the spirit fire twice in succession underground and the true essence in his body had long been completely consumed. The little bit he had left was used to use the wood escape technique. His true essence was not corroded by the black sand. However, the thing that worried Xiao Hua the most was that his dantian was filled with ink sand as well, and the faint point from before had already been corroded by the ink sand at this moment and vanished. It was even to the extent that his entire dantian and meridians seemed to be filled with a feeling of numbness and itchiness, as if countless ants were lightly biting here. This was also Xiao Hua. His meridians cultivated the dragon transformation art and he had already been baptized by the lightning tribulation when he was building his foundation. He could be considered to have been reborn. At this moment, he was still able to endure the corrosion of the black sand. If it was someone else, they would have already suffered irreparable damage. Xiao Hua wanted to use the spirit fire to see if it was effective against the black sand. However, he did not have the slightest bit of magic power and was simply powerless to urge it. After thinking for a moment, he urged the dragon transformation art. Like a huge dragon swinging its tail, he wanted to first eliminate the black sand that was corroding his meridians. However, right now, his entire meridians were filled with black sand. After getting rid of a layer, the rest of the black sand stuck to him and there were countless of them. What should I do? Xiao Hua was somewhat dazed. At this moment, Xiao Hua's entire body flickered with brilliance. Obviously, his magic power to support the wood escape technique was already insufficient. I'd better use the mental cultivation method first. Xiao Hua made a prompt decision and immediately urged the earth expansion technique. He wanted to absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth from the outside world to refine the earth crystal yarrow milk. However, it was fine if he did not draw spiritual energy. Once he drew spiritual energy, he discovered that the entire black wood was filled with condensed black sand. That black sand was like a stubborn stone, blocking all the cracks. Not even the slightest bit of spiritual energy of heaven and earth could enter. Xiao Hua suddenly understood. Of course, at every moment, the black wood was within the black sand. How could it not absorb the black sand? It was also because it absorbed an extremely large amount of black sand that the black wood was so hard and so calm inside. That was why the black sand could not invade. What should I do now? Xiao Hua was again at his wit's end. Without true essence in his meridians, he could not urge his magic power. Without magic power, the wood escape technique could not last for long. He would definitely be squeezed out of the black wood. Facing the overflowing black sand, he was exposed to the black sand for a moment just now. All of his cultivation was knocked down and he was completely supported by the dragon transformation art. If he stayed in the black sand for a long time, he would definitely be corroded by the black sand and become immortal. However, just as Xiao Hua was in a hurry, the black sand in his meridians slightly loosened again. Xiao Hua was overjoyed. When he looked carefully, he discovered that the corroded black sand near the earth crystal yarrow milk disappeared a little. Moreover, even more earth-type spiritual energy of heaven and earth was actually forming in Xiao Hua's meridians. Great! Xiao Hua was overjoyed. On one hand, he activated the dragon transformation art, and on the other, he hurriedly activated the mental cultivation method of earth expansion. When the spiritual energy seeped out from the gaps in the ink sand's meridians, he hurriedly refined the spiritual energy, turning it into threads of true essence. Before the brilliance of the wood escape technique flashed, he hurriedly replenished his magic power. Seeing the light green brilliance around Xiao Hua gradually stabilizing, Xiao Hua finally relaxed. He took the time to examine his body, bloodline, Dharma body, and other places. Hey! There is not a trace of black sand in my bloodline. Xiao Hua was slightly surprised. Although there is some black sand in my body, it seems to be condensed together. It is somewhat similar to the black sand in the black wood. Ayo, Dharma body. Xiao Hua suddenly had some understanding. -8. Chapter 2003. Xiao Hua's phoenix Dharma body was condensed from the wind of the netherworld, so it wasn't solid at all. At this time, when he saw the ink sand occupying the Dharma body and not corroding the Dharma body, he was enlightened. With a shake of his arms, the Dharma body flew out of his body and out of the black wood. The phoenix Dharma body was like the wind of the netherworld, so it did not seem to be blown away by the ink storm. It swayed as it flew to the top of the black tree. The black tree was huge, so the phoenix Dharma body was not particularly obvious. As it spread its wings, the ink sand that was everywhere rushed into the Dharma body. It quickly gathered at the 132 million points and expanded. Good. Xiao Hua could not help but laugh again. I have this Dharma body cast with ink sand. Even if I meet Huang Yi again, she can't just blow this Dharma body away, right? Soon after, he no longer paid attention to the Dharma body and concentrated on refining the spiritual qi. He wanted to remove the ink sand from his meridians as soon as possible. However, at the beginning, there was very little true qi. Xiao Hua could only refine it bit by bit. He even had time to think about other things. For example, why didn't the ink sand seep into the black tree? For example, who was that nascent soul cultivator Xiao Hua met? But after waiting for a few hours, when the ink sand in his meridians decreased by 10%, Xiao Hua felt that something was wrong. An unprecedented crisis seemed to quietly descend on Xiao Hua's meridians. This was because, under the corrosion of the black sand, the earth attribute heaven and earth spiritual qi within the earth crystal yarrow milk was released without any restraint. It was far from the orderly process when Xiao Hua was refining it himself, and the heaven and earth spiritual qi was extremely abundant. This was only the beginning, but the heaven and earth spiritual qi was already so abundant that Xiao Hua was somewhat overwhelmed. If in the future, there would definitely be a lot of spiritual qi being corroded by the ink sand. Then, Xiao Hua would not be able to refine it. Not only would his meridians and dantian explode, even his physical body would be hard to protect. Damn it! Xiao Hua scratched his ears and cheeks. He was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. What he had to do now was either to refine the spiritual qi or to stop the ink sand from corroding the earth crystal yarrow milk. But what method did he have to stop the ink sand? Xiao Hua even wanted to jump out of the black wood and let the ink sand block his meridians again. But obviously, Xiao Hua understood that even if he went out now and the black sand continued to block his meridians, the amount of black sand corroding the earth crystal yarrow milk would only increase, not decrease. In other words, before the earth crystal yarrow milk was completely corroded, and before a huge amount of earth-attributed spiritual energy was released, Xiao Hua would only have more chances to explode. After thinking for a moment, Xiao Hua couldn't think of any way to deal with such a huge crisis. Let's fight. This is also a great opportunity. Xiao Hua was helpless. He hurriedly sat down cross-legged and activated the dragon transformation art with all his might. At the same time, he immersed his mind into the space and connected to the primordial spirit brand in the heavenly Tao space. He hurriedly activated the earth expansion technique, hoping that he could use a stupid method before he thought of a way. Damn it, why am I so stupid? How could I possibly explode? Xiao Hua just activated his cultivation method and wanted to curse himself. Because not long after his true essence was formed, it was immediately corroded by the black sand and disappeared. His meridians simply couldn't store true essence. Alas, what a pity for the earth crystal yarrow milk. Xiao Hua's heart calmed down a little, but his heart ached for his earth crystal yarrow milk. However, his heart only ached for a moment, and he wanted to slap his own mouth again. How could things be as simple as he thought? Although his true essence was corroded, the amount of black sand that disappeared was not much. It seemed that this black sand was the nemesis of true essence. Moreover, in the space created by the disappearance of true essence, more spiritual energy gathered, and the volume was far greater than the amount of true essence that disappear. What Xiao Hua needed to do now was to refine the spiritual energy into true essence. There was no other way. Xiao Hua's true essence had never flowed like this before. Circle after circle, it was like a small stream flowing down from the top of a mountain. It avoided the layers of black sand and flowed into the dantian where the black sand gathered. Xiao Hua's dantian was also filled with black sand at this time. Every time a trace of true essence entered, it would be corroded by the black sand, and the amount of black sand would also decrease. Although there was a lot of black sand in his dantian, it couldn't stop Xiao Hua's true essence from flowing like water. First it was a small stream, then it was a small river, and then it was like a river. After waiting for several hours, Xiao Hua's head was full of sweat. He clenched his teeth and activated his cultivation method. When he was in a state of madness, the black sand in his dantian was finally emptied. And the moment the black sand was emptied, his entire dantian slightly trembled, as if everything had started anew. The true essence that was once again injected rapidly rushed into the dantian where the virtual dot disappeared. A brand new, even more condensed little dot was born again, and after the true essence injected into the virtual dot suddenly disappeared, it reappeared. This time, it was different from before. The density of the true essence had more than doubled, and its volume had naturally shrunk again. And after the transformation, the majority of the true essence remained in the dantian, and a very small part once again rushed into the meridians. Obviously, Xiao Hua's cultivation had made great progress after the destruction. But at this time, Xiao Hua was anxiously refining the spiritual energy, paying attention to the growth of the spiritual energy with all his attention. He simply didn't notice the change in his true essence. Because at this time, the speed at which the black sand was disappearing couldn't compare to the speed at which the spiritual energy was being produced. Even though the true essence had shrunk by more than half, the spiritual energy contained in the earth crystal yarrow milk was really too much. Now, only half of it had disappeared. What method? What method? Xiao Hua was burning with impatience. On one hand, he was thinking of a method, and on the other hand, he had to calmly comprehend the heavenly Tao. He had to increase the speed of refining the spiritual energy as much as possible. It was really difficult for him. Right at this time, Xiao Hua's dragon transformation art seemed to have some changes. His entire meridians began to tremble, and a faint dragon roar was produced in Xiao Hua's body, as if his meridians were about to fly away. At first, it just so happened that it was in Xiao Hua's middle dantian. Xiao Hua felt that the dragon-like meridians didn't have a dragon head, or perhaps, the dragon head was in the middle dantian, and was tightly pressed down by an incomparably huge thing. The dragon-like meridians couldn't fly away. Ah! Xiao Hua was shocked. A kind of inexplicable uneasiness arose in his heart. Could it be? Could it be? Xiao Hua mumbled for a long time, but still couldn't come up with anything. It seemed that apart from his middle dantian being imprisoned like the Niwen Palace, he couldn't think of any other reason. Dawn Rain Continent's martial arts were to cultivate the lower dantian, and didn't involve the middle dantian at all. All cultivators also wouldn't check the middle dantian. Of course, Xiao Hua also didn't think of this at all, and at this time, he suddenly discovered that his middle dantian was actually different. How could he not be shocked? -8. Chapter 2004. Could it be that I'm really a celestial from overseas? Xiao Hua seemed to think of the legendary celestial clan. He heard that they were celestials who only cultivated and didn't practice magic, or cultivators who cultivated the middle dantian, raw. Under the dragon transformation art, Xiao Hua's meridians seemed to have expanded a lot, but it clearly wasn't the limit. However, his meridians were already somewhat unable to bear it. They were restless, as if trying to break free from the shackles of his middle dantian. Xiao Hua had already sensed the previous danger, but he still didn't feel the danger in front of him. What he was facing was not only the risk of his meridians bursting, but also the middle dantian, where the dragon head of his meridians was. The black and white seal was emitting a faint brilliance. It was extremely easy to suppress the vibration of his meridians. Moreover, an incomparably valiant spiritual energy fluctuation was emitted from it. Fortunately, although the ink storm in the Ink Jiao Black Forest was weakened, it was still ferocious. These spiritual energy fluctuations had just been emitted when they were corroded, worn down, and blocked by the nemesis of spiritual energy. Who exactly is this young master's enemy? Xiao Hua clenched his teeth, abnormally angry. Not only did they seal this young master's Niwen Palace, they even sealed this young master's middle dantian. Looks like this young master isn't an ordinary person who doesn't know how to cultivate. Moreover, this young master's cultivation is completely different from the cultivation methods of Xiaoyu continent. This young master's cultivation before being sealed might also be extremely high. The reason why this young master had to cultivate from the first level of qi refining, bit by bit, was because this young master's enemy completely sealed this young master's cultivation. However, after being angry for a moment, Xiao Hua was somewhat puzzled. Why just seal it? If it was an enemy, wouldn't it be fine if they just killed this young master or completely crippled this young master's cultivation? Why would they still waste a lot of energy to seal this young master? Could it be that they weren't afraid that this young master would cultivate again? Weren't they afraid that this young master would break the seal and kill his way back to take revenge on them? I know. They destroyed this young master's memory, wasn't it because they didn't want this young master to know who they were? Weren't they afraid that this young master would go back to take revenge? Xiao Hua coldly thought. In that case, this young master's previous cultivation was definitely not inferior to this enemy's. They couldn't kill this young master, so they had no choice but to use this method. Since that's the case, how can I disappoint you all? Xiao Hua's viciousness grew from the side of his guts, and he fiercely said, "This young master will definitely not die here. I must recover my memories, recover my magic power, and find out who my enemy is." However, after his lofty aspirations, Xiao Hua was only excited for a moment before he became dejected again. Not to mention that his enemy's cultivation was thousands of times higher than his. Even in his current predicament, he didn't have any means to escape. What revenge was there to talk about? At this moment, his meridians shook a few more times. The shaking reached his middle dantian and stopped again. Right now, his meridians were probably more than 10 times larger than before. The heaven and earth spiritual qi in them had nowhere to go. Xiao Hua's meridians had the possibility of exploding at any moment. In the area where the earth crystal yarrow milk was located, 30% of the black spots were still surrounded by a large amount of black sand. Jade Blood Pill Heart refines. In his urgency, this arcane effort suddenly appeared in Xiao Hua's mind. Damn it! I'm really a genius. Xiao Hua carefully examined the arcane effort that flashed through his mind. He couldn't help but smile. No matter what this arcane effort was, as long as it could consume the true essence in his meridians, it would be fine. Fight. Xiao Hua didn't have time to finish reading the arcane effort. He already knew that he had used it countless times before. He also didn't have time to consider the effects of touching his Niwen Palace. He hurriedly activated the Jade Blood Pill Heart Refines technique. Following the activation of Xiao Hua's arcane effort, a wisp of heart fire was born from Xiao Hua's true essence. This heart fire was like a single spark that started a prairie fire, igniting his entire meridians and even the true essence in his lower dantian. Hong. A light sound shook Xiao Hua's mind. The true essence in Xiao Hua's meridians had completely disappeared. Of course, when the true essence disappeared, the pain also came as expected. A feeling more painful than needles and thorns came from Xiao Hua's Buddha Arares big belly. It came from Xiao Hua's sealed Niwen Palace. Moreover, the black and white seal outside the Niwen Palace was the same as the seal in his middle dantian. It also emitted a faint brilliance, and a valiant spiritual energy was immediately emitted. Good. Xiao Hua didn't have time to care about the cold sweat on his forehead. He hurriedly activated his arcane effort to refine the heaven and earth spiritual energy in his meridians. 100 days passed. At the beginning, Xiao Hua had to use the jade blood pill heart refines technique once every 12 hours to endure the inhumane torture. But as time passed, after less than 10 days, it was changed to every 10 hours. In the end, it was changed to every 1 hour. Damn it. If this continues, even if this young master doesn't die from this headache, this young master's enemies will come looking for me. After using the jade blood pill heart refines technique so many times, Xiao Hua had already felt the slight changes in the seal on his Niwen Palace. He was very distressed as he thought, but fortunately, the earth crystal yarrow milk has almost been completely refined by this young master. Although the meridians refined by the dragon transformation art have expanded several times, they are still wandering around the limit. I can barely cope with it. As long as I use the jade blood pill heart refines technique a few more times, it will be done. Xiao Hua refined his Zhen Yuan while releasing his divine sense. At this time, although the ink cloud black forest was covered with ink sand, it was already the end of the ink storm. It was no longer as devastating as before. Not good. Xiao Hua saw that his Dharma body was still outside, and suddenly thought, other people's Dharma body is transformed from their blood vessels. This young master's Dharma body appeared when he cultivated the great strength Vajra Dharma body. Now that it has been filled with ink sand, can this young master still take it back? Even if I take it back, will it swallow my Zhen Yuan? Thinking of this, Xiao Hua hurriedly and carefully withdrew the phoenix celestial body. However, at this time, the phoenix celestial body was already half full. He saw that the 13,200 virtual points wrapped around this solid black sand, which was already as solid as black wood. Outside the black sand, there was also the swirling netherworld wind. Fortunately, nothing unexpected happened. I can still take it back. Xiao Hua waited for the Dharma body to merge into his body, and there was no change. Only then did he breathe a sigh of relief. But then he complained, damn it, what is this? The Dharma body has been outside for more than 100 days, and it still hasn't been filled. This young master just went out for a moment and was already tormented to the point of death. This damned heavens, what are they thinking? Forget it, let's hurry up and clean up all the ink sand. Xiao Hua complained, but in his heart, there was no neglect. He gathered his strength and used the jade blood pill heart refines technique several times in succession. After several hours, he completely cleaned up all the ink sand. -8. Chapter 2005. However, what Xiao Hua didn't know was that when Xiao Hua activated the jade blood pill refining heart, the spiritual power fluctuation on the seal finally broke through the black sand of the ink Jiao black forest. It was extremely weak but extremely fast. It spread out at a speed that Xiao Hua couldn't imagine, and the spiritual power actually spread in 2 different directions. In just half a day's time, in 2 cave residences that were extremely far away from the ink Jiao black forest, one was a white-haired old man with a youthful face, and the other was a dignified middle-aged cultivator. Both of them were in closed-door cultivation, and the spiritual power fluctuation easily broke through the restriction that they had set up. Obviously, this spiritual power fluctuation was extremely important. Almost at the same time, the 2 of them opened their eyes. Their expressions changed slightly, and they hurriedly urged their magic power to change their hand seals. The 2 people's hand seals were different, but they were both incomparably complicated. After waiting for half a meal's worth of time, the 2 of them let out a soft shout and struck the air. One of them had a mirror in front of him, the other had a misty color. However, both of them couldn't see anything after looking at it for a long time. They both frowned slightly. The middle-aged cultivator stood up and waved his hand, and a rainbow appeared. He said a few words to it, and then the rainbow flew away. The middle-aged cultivator wasn't in a hurry to cultivate, and he slightly paced. Strange, it seems like the fluctuation of the seal, but it seems like something is wrong. Could it be that it wasn't done by that old ghost? Well, it shouldn't be. That old ghost made a heart oath that he wouldn't act on his own accord. Could it be that kid who did it? However, it's only been a few decades. It's impossible for him to cultivate to such a high level. Could it be that the other old farts saw it? Even more impossible, right? They saw the seal and didn't know that it was done by us. Those with higher cultivation than us wouldn't act, and those with lower cultivation wouldn't even dare to act. Could it be that there are other changes? The white-haired old man paced back and forth, and he secretly said, however, looking at the spiritual power coming from the seal, there shouldn't be any problems with the seal. There shouldn't be any problems with the plan that we agreed on with that old fart. But, how can we not break the heart oath and not let that old ghost know? Alas, the heart oath that day was really strict. I'm afraid there are some problems. After smoking half a cigarette, both of their eyes lit up almost at the same time. Xiao Hua, who was far away in the Ink Jiao Black Forest, naturally couldn't know this. At this time, he was shrouded in a thick layer of surprise, and had no time to care about other things. In the previous 100 days, he was in a race against time. He used the blood core refining heart technique to maintain the space in his meridians, S-meridians, space meridians, for fear of the huge amount of heaven and earth spirit chi of heaven's cores, and blood's heart's cultivation ts heart's ST be used SS meridians. Just a moment ago, when the last trace of ink sand corroded the earth-type heaven and earth spirit chi of heaven and earth, Xiao Hua used the blood core refining heart technique for the last time, transforming all the true essence in his body into a heart fire that directly rushed into his Niwen palace. That was really the most painful piercing pain in the past 100 days, and the meridians in his body also returned to normal. Naturally, they were more than twice as big as before. Only at this time did Xiao Hua completely calm down. Then, Xiao Hua let out a long sigh of relief. Activating his heart technique, he once again refined the last trace of earth crystal yarrow milk in his meridians. As the heaven and earth spirit chi of heaven and earth transformed into true essence, it once again flowed smoothly in his meridians, rushing into his lower dantian. When it rushed into that somewhat solid point, Xiao Hua shockingly discovered that he seemed to have already advanced to the middle stage of foundation establishment. Good heavens, tilde, sure enough, there is a great terror between life and death. Xiao Hua was so surprised that he was speechless. Originally, I thought that if other people needed 30 years to reach the early stage of foundation establishment, I would need at least 40 years, or even 50 years. Therefore, I didn't concentrate on practicing the heart technique, and usually just did routine homework. Even in these 3 years, I only focused on formations. Who would have thought that in a mere 100 days in this Ink Jiao Black Forest, I would finish what other people needed 30 years to do? Really, I don't know what to say. Is this young master a genius? Moreover, according to eldest senior brother, there is a bottleneck from the early stage of foundation establishment to the middle stage of foundation establishment. There must be comprehension and accumulation. How come this young master didn't have any? How come everything went so smoothly? It seems like, just now, I didn't have the slightest feeling of a breakthrough. However, my meridians and Dharma body have some improvements, but bone tempering, there are some problems. It seems like there is no feeling of improvement like before. Could it be? In fact, in the 1 year when Xiao Hua was in the early stage of foundation establishment, although he only focused on manipulating the spiritual fire, how could the spiritual fire be easily manipulated? Although Xiao Hua couldn't practice the heart technique, the circulation of the true essence and the operation of the heart technique were the micromanipulation of the Dharma power. Xiao Hua was very careful at every moment, and he constantly strived for perfection. His hard work in that 1 year was far more than other people's 5 years. Moreover, in Tianmen Mountain, the master who set up the formation was not an ordinary person. A formation that could kill a nascent soul cultivator, the formation master was at least a nascent soul cultivator. Xiao Hua, with the cultivation of the early stage of foundation establishment, repaired the formation with the courtesy of the gold core cultivator, which was far beyond his own cultivation limit. Xiao Hua was able to repair all the formations in Tianmen Mountain in 3 years, and the hard work he put in was more than other people's 10 years of effort. Moreover, Huang Yi's painful experience gave Xiao Hua an essential understanding of the way of life and death in the way of heaven, which greatly promoted his cultivation. These factors piled up in the past. Xiao Hua's cultivation was bound to advance by leaps and bounds, but he just didn't have an opportunity, and the ink sand and ink bough in the ink jiao black forest were exactly this opportunity. An opportunity to compress time, an opportunity to transform a huge amount of Earth's spiritual energy into true essence. Moreover, the early stage of foundation establishment was only the beginning of true cultivation. Xiao Hua was comprehending the way of heaven, so how could he encounter any bottlenecks? If the earth crystal yarrow milk hadn't been corroded too much by the ink sand, Xiao Hua would have been close to the late stage of foundation establishment. Of course, if the earth crystal yarrow milk hadn't been corroded by the ink sand and wasted a lot of heaven and earth spiritual energy, Xiao Hua's meridians would have burst long ago. As for whether Xiao Hua could survive or not, that was another matter. In addition, if he used the earth crystal yarrow milk in the ink jiao black forest and tried to increase his cultivation by leaps and bounds again, Xiao Hua probably wouldn't agree even if he was killed on the spot. No matter what, Xiao Hua had already entered the middle stage of foundation establishment. This was something worthy of celebration. However, Xiao Hua, who had always been careful, didn't rejoice for too long. After all, he had entered the middle stage of foundation establishment in a hurry, so his realm was still unstable. He also didn't dare to be negligent. He still sat cross-legged, his eyes focused on his nose and his nose focused on his heart. He focused his mind and calmly operated his mental cultivation method, cycle after cycle, carefully cultivating. In the depths of the ink jiao black forest, there was a barren area. There weren't any black trees, nor were there any vines. In that extremely dark area, there was actually some light on the ground. Several strange spiritual beasts quickly flitted across it. -8. Chapter 2006. These spirit beasts looked like monkeys, but they did not have tails. Their bodies were only covered with black animal skin, and there was no hair on their bodies. Although they had a pair of sharp eyes like monkeys on their leaf-like faces, their mouths were extremely wide, with 2 fangs sticking out of their mouths. They looked very ferocious. Squeak squeak tilde tilde, one of the spirit beasts that was flying in the air suddenly screeched and pounced on the pitch-black ground. Then, its long arms, which were over its knees, suddenly reached into the ground. Roar! Mo Jiao, who was about 10 feet long and 3 feet wide, was pulled out of the ground by the spirit beast. The spirit beast's arms had pierced into Mo Jiao's body, and black blood was flowing out of the ground. Once Mo Jiao was pulled out of the ground, its 2 fleshy wings flapped quickly, and it was about to fly into the sky. The spirit beast's body was also brought up into the sky. Squeak! Squeak! The other spirit beasts were delighted when they saw this. They flew up one by one and pounced on the other parts of Mo Jiao's body. Hiss! Mo Jiao hissed and opened his mouth to spit out a dark cloud of air. It was aimed at one of the spirit beasts. At the same time, Mo Jiao swept his tail towards another spirit beast. Something strange happened. Mo Jiao's powerful mass of air, which even a gold core adept could not deal with, did not alert the spirit beast at all. When the mass of air was close to it, the spirit beast quickly stretched out its arm, revealing a palm with only 3 fingers. It reached into the mass of air as if it was searching for the moon at the bottom of the ocean. The 3 fingers of the spirit beast flickered with a dim light and easily pierced through the mass of air. A few balls of black sand in the mass of air hit the spirit beast's body in a flash. Although the spirit beast was pushed back a few times, it did not seem to be injured at all. When the spirit beast broke through the mass of air, Mo Jiao's tail had already hit another spirit beast. Although the spirit beast suddenly flew up, it was not as fast as Mo Jiao's tail. Bang! The spirit beast's waist was hit. Squeak! Squeak! The spirit beast stretched out its arms and stabbed into Mo Jiao's tail. Black blood flowed out, and Mo Jiao swung his tail up and down in pain, trying to get rid of the spirit beast. However, no matter how hard Mo Jiao struggled, the spirit beast would not let go. Its arms stabbed deeper into Mo Zhao's tail. Since the two spirit beasts were fighting like this, the other spirit beasts were having a much easier time. Two spirit beasts landed on Mo Zhao's wings, and another one landed on Mo Zhao's head. All three spirit beasts stretched out their extremely sharp fingers and stabbed into Mo Zhao's body skillfully. Roar! Roar! Mo Zhao screamed in pain. He did not have time to fight back, and he struggled to escape. However, Mo Zhao could only let out a few screams before his wings were dug out by the two spiritual beasts. They were thrown onto the ground with blood all over. Mo Zhao also fell to the ground from mid-air. In just a few minutes, the spirit beast on Mo Zhao's head lifted its hand with all its might, and there was a big hole in Mo Zhao's head. Hot, fragrant brain matter flowed out of the big hole. Several spirit beasts cruelly ate the brain matter of Mo Zhao, who was barely breathing, and flew away excitedly. Mo Zhao, who had lost his wings, was left rolling on the ground for an hour before he died. After another hour, a cold wind blew, and no other spirit beasts appeared in the Black Forest. After a faint wave of light flashed on a hill about 1,000 feet away from Mo Zhao's body, 3 human figures appeared. They were Chen Yi, Qiong Yefeng, and Xie Zhiqian, who had taken off their invisibility talismans. The 3 of them looked pale, and their robes were slightly messy. They were looking greedily at Mo Zhao's body in the distance. Sure enough, there is always something to overcome something. Chen Yi sighed and said, Mo Zhao is the master of the Black Forest. He is everywhere in the Black Forest. All the cultivators, regardless of their cultivation level, are afraid of him. However, in this place, Mo Zhao is just the food of the golden armored centipede. Mo Zhao must have accidentally bumped into the Black Forest. The golden armored centipede did not have any golden threads on its body, so it is obviously still underage. Even so, Mo Zhao was still eaten alive by the golden armored centipede. Yes, it is such a dangerous place. I can't imagine how fellow cultivator Zhu Chenghe found it. Qiong Yefeng also sighed and said, we avoided Mo Bao and waited outside the Black Forest for nearly a year before we came here. Now, we have waited for 3 days. Why haven't we seen fellow cultivator Zhu yet? How would I know? Chen Yi stared at Mo Zhao's corpse and said absent-mindedly, Brother Zhu disappeared when Mo Bao was born. He did not even reply to the messaging charm that he sent outside the Black Forest. I'm afraid that he stayed in the Black Forest. Hihi, there must be a lot of treasures in the Black Forest after Mo Bao. Xie Zhiqian licked his lips and said, there must be a lot of magic treasures and jade slip. There must be a lot of Mo Zhao's body. Hihi, fellow cultivator Xie, don't think too much. Fellow cultivator Zhu was able to enter the Black Forest safely last time, so he must have some tricks up his sleeve that we don't know about. We don't have fellow cultivator Zhu's skills and cultivation, so let's just look at what is in front of us. Chen Yi rolled her eyes and looked at Xie Zhiqian. She pointed at Mo Zhao's body and said with a smile, this is really a gift from God. It is a reward for us to go into the depths of the Black Forest. Fellow cultivator Xie, fellow cultivator Qiong and I will guard the area for you. You go and bring Mo Zhao's body here so that we can divide it. Xie Zhiqian frowned slightly and looked to the left. He could only extend his divine sense for about 10 feet. He was worried that he could not extend it further. However, when he saw Chen Yi and Qiong Yefeng smiling at him, Xie Zhiqian forced a smile and said, fellow cultivators, please wait for a moment. As he spoke, his body floated up and slowly flew toward Mo Zhao's corpse. They were in the depths of the ink cloud Black Forest, close to the core. Although the amount of ink cloud in the air seemed to be much lesser, the ink cloud black sand was more corrosive to one's true essence. Moreover, the divine sense and dharma power were restricted. The flying technique that cultivators usually relied on could not be used smoothly. Therefore, Xie Zhiqian had to be careful. Fortunately, Xie Zhiqian scanned his surroundings and released his divine sense to the maximum. Thus, he did not encounter any spirit beasts when he arrived at Mo Zhao's location. However, just as Xie Zhiqian was about to put Mo Zhao into his interspatial bag with a wave of his hand, he heard Chen Yi yelling from afar, fellow cultivator Xie, please wait a moment. Ah! Xie Zhiqian was stunned. He hurriedly waved his sleeves and took out his flying sword. He looked around. He saw that Chen Yi and Qiong Yefeng were also cautious. They both took out their flying swords and looked into the distance. Xie Zhiqian followed their gazes and saw that behind the black hill in the distance, a human figure was flying and jumping on the black ground. It was gradually moving toward the three of them. Ah! Xiao Hua! Xie Zhiqian was stunned. He exclaimed in disbelief, "This guy! How is he still alive? And he can find this place?" That's right, the three of them came together. Because of Mo Bao, the secret path that Chen Yi knew about no longer existed. They had no choice but to force their way through and spent a tremendous amount of effort to reach this place. Along the way, they didn't mention Xiao Hua at all. In their hearts, Xiao Hua was most likely killed by Mo Bao. Even if there was an extremely small possibility that he escaped from Mo Bao's Black Forest, it was still impossible for him to reach this place. But the fact was that Xiao Hua was thousands of feet away from them. At the same time, he saw Chen Yi and the others. He was excitedly waving his hand and even shouting loudly, "This guy! Does he want to die?" Chen Yi was shocked and angry. She immediately ordered Qiong Yefeng, fellow cultivator Qiong, "Go and pick him up. Don't let him shout like this." Qiong Yefeng thought for a moment and said with a smile, "If he wants to die, let him be. What does it have to do with us?" "You." Chen Yi was at a loss for words. She glared at Qiong Yufeng, but she had nothing to say. This was not her burial flower manner, and her cultivation was not stronger than Qiong Yufeng's. She was not the one in charge, so she had no reason to order Qiong Yufeng to do anything. While Chen Hua and Qiong Yefeng were on tenterhooks, Xiao Hua's face was full of joy. He flew to Chen Yi and the others and said with a smile, "Manor Lord Chen, Senior Qiong, Senior Xie, I finally found you again." Looking at Xiao Hua's sorry state and pale complexion, Chen Yi said indifferently, "You really exceeded my expectations. You actually managed to find this place. We have been looking for you outside the Black Forest for a long time, but we couldn't find you. Manor Head Chen, this junior is truly in a perilous situation this time." Xiao Hua's face was full of joy when he heard that. He said, "This junior obtained Senior Zhu's jade slip." Seeing Xiao Hua's eyebrows raised and his happy appearance, Chen Yi couldn't help but feel vexed. She waved her hand and said, "Forget it, there's no need to say any more. You being able to escape is your good fortune." She then looked at Xie Zhiqian, who had returned at the same time as Xiao Hua, and said, "Fellow cultivator Xie, take out Mo Zhao's corpse. We will divide it." "Yes." Xie Zhiqian waved his hand and took out the corpse. Xiao Hua was stunned when he saw the hole on Mo Zhao's head and the faint fragrance coming from it. He was very surprised and even said with admiration, "Senior Xie, you are so powerful. You actually killed Mo Zhao? I would have run away if I had seen Mo Zhao like this." Xie Zhiqian rolled his eyes at him and said, "This old man picked it up." Then, he looked at Chen Yi and asked, "Manor Lord Chen, there are 4 of us now. How should we divide it?" This. Chen Yi was a little annoyed. If Mo Zhao was killed by the 3 of them, Xiao Hua would not have a share. However, Mo Zhao was picked up, and the 3 of them did not do anything. Furthermore, Xiao Hua happened to arrive at the scene. How could they not give him a share of the loot? -8. Chapter 2007. Seeing Chen Yi's expression change slightly, Xiao Hua, who already knew Chen Yi's temperament, quickly waved his hand and said, "Senior Xie, don't count me in. I'm already lucky to be here. If you find the heavenly yin grass in the future, please help me." "Well, since Xiao Hua doesn't want it, let's split it quickly," Chen Yi urged, as if she was afraid that someone else would appear. "Xiao Hua doesn't want it, but we have to give it to him," Qiong Yefeng said, dissatisfied with Chen Yi's stinginess. "What do you mean?" Chen Yi retorted and looked at Qiong Yefeng. "Hihi, what can I mean?" Qiong Yefeng said with a smile, "Xiao Hua is a junior, but we are seniors. We can't lose the dignity of seniors because of our selfish desires." Xie Zhiqian looked at Qiong Yefeng strangely. He didn't think Qiong Yefeng was a righteous cultivator. Xiao Hua was even more surprised. He looked at the 2 of them and quickly said with a smile, "Senior Qiong, thank you for your kindness. I don't know what use this Mo Jiao has. Let's do it this way. I only want a piece of Mo Jiao's skin. Xiao Hua roughly gestured with his hand. Chen Yi saw Xiao Hua's action and coldly looked into the distance, ignoring the three of them. When Qiong Yefeng saw Chen Yi's reaction, he put his hands behind his back and didn't say anything. Xiao Hua and Xie Zhiqian understood. Xiao Hua smiled shyly at Xie Zhiqian, looking quite embarrassed. Xie Zhiqian shook his head with a wry smile and took out a flying sword. He cut a piece of Mo Jiao's skin and handed it to Xiao Hua. Then he asked Xiao Hua to divide the Mo Jiao into 3 parts. Although Chen Yi looked away, she had been paying attention to what was going on. After Qiong Yefeng finished dividing Mo Jiao, she straightened up and put her share into her storage bag without saying a word. Qiong Yefeng snorted and put his share away as well. Obviously, he still had some opinions about Chen Yi. Xiao Hua was surprised when he saw Xie Zhiqian put away Mo Jiao's body. He couldn't figure out what had happened between the 3 of them after not seeing them for a few months. Not only was there some disharmony, but Zhu Chenghe was also not here. However, only Zhu Chenghe knew the location of the Sky Yin herb. If he wasn't here, what was the point of the 4 of them coming here? Moreover, Xiao Hua had already searched the surroundings before coming here, and did not find anything special. He knew that this was merely a meeting place, and not the place where the 4 of them were going to compete in Sword Immortals. Of course, Xiao Hua had already carefully read through the information given by Zhen Qing and knew that the place he was talking about was nearby. However, because he was afraid of missing out on Chen Yi and the others, he didn't dare to go and search for it. After the ink storm subsided, he immediately rushed over a few days later. "Thank you, Senior." Xiao Hua whispered. "What about Senior Zhu? Is he not here yet?" Zhu Chenghe was neither cold nor indifferent to Xiao Hua, but he obviously didn't have any other thoughts. Xiao Hua was indeed a little worried for him. How would this old man know? Xie Zhiqian looked around and whispered, "We were separated from the ink storm before, and we didn't get in touch with him. We thought he had already come here, but after waiting for a few days, we still didn't see any movement. I'm afraid this matter is a little strange." Qiong Yefeng, who had been silent all this time, suddenly said, "The place where Daoist Master Brightsword and Li Shoubai fought is so secretive. How many cultivators of the Dawn Rain continent have searched this ink storm black forest to no avail? Fellow Daoist Zhu, how could he have encountered him? Moreover, he came out of that place safely. Mph, what's so strange about this?" Chen Yi sneered and glanced at Xiao Hua. Isn't Xiao Hua an early-stage Foundation establishment cultivator? Didn't he safely escape from the ink storm and find this place safely? No matter what, Zhu Chenghe is an intermediate-stage gold core cultivator. Could it be that he can't compare to Xiao Hua? Xiao Hua laughed and didn't speak, but he secretly criticized Zhu Chenghe in his heart. At this time, Zhu Chenghe. I'm afraid he really can't compare to him. Qiong Yefeng glanced at Chen Yi and didn't refute. He said, "Moreover, there was no news for 4 years last time. In these 4 years, what did fellow Daoist Zhu do? What can be compared to the 9 stars transit sword spirit?" Sword spirit? Xiao Hua was stunned and immediately understood that the sword spirit was the thing that the 4 coveted. This. Xie Zhiqian nodded. "I got the Fire Bat King of the Flame Forest Swamp. I always thought I could come to the Ink Storm Black Forest immediately, so I was always puzzled. Also," Qiong Yefeng said, "our cultivation is inferior to fellow Daoist Zhu, but we escaped to the outside of the Ink Storm Black Forest after fellow Daoist Zhu. We all escaped, so where did he go? Moreover, we are already here, so why didn't he appear? Oh, could it be Zhu Chenghe has already gone?" Chen Yi was shocked and shouted, "Could it be that he has found a way to go there in these 4 years? Yes, it's possible." Xie Zhiqian was a little angry. "However, I still hope that Zhu Chenghe has been buried in Ink Storm Black Forest. The problem is, if Senior Zhu could go there by himself, why didn't he go there by himself? Why did he invite the 3 seniors?" Xiao Hua shook his head slightly. "I'm afraid he wants to use us as a shield," Qiong Yefeng said fiercely. Chen Yi seemed to think of something and shook her head. "I don't think so. Fellow Daoist Zhu told me that he had something to explain to me in the Inkstorm Black Forest. What? While Chen Yi was talking, Xiao Hua suddenly raised his head. In the opposite direction of Xiao Hua, Zhu Chenghe's figure was flying slowly at a low altitude. He was very cautious and was flying towards them. Just in time. Fellow Daoist Zhu is here. I'll ask him about the situation later. Chen Yi stopped talking and said thoughtfully, "Oh, I'm sorry to have kept you waiting for so long." Zhu Chenghe cupped his hands and said before he flew near them, "I was delayed by something. I'd like to atone for my mistake." Fellow Daoist Zhu. Qiong Yefeng said with a smile, "Even with our cultivation, we came here early. What's the matter?" "Yes, fellow Daoist Zhu. We can't send a messaging charm out of the Inkstorm Black Forest." Chen Yi said with a smile. He. Zhu Chenghe said mysteriously, "Where do you think I've gone?" However, as soon as Zhu Chenghe finished speaking, the four of them flew in another direction at the same time. It was the place where the golden armored centipedes had disappeared. Their expressions changed slightly. Almost at the same time, the four of them clapped their hands together and took out invisibility talismans from their storage bags. They slapped the talismans on their bodies and disappeared. Xiao Hua was naturally quick-witted. The time it took for the invisibility talismans to hit him was not much slower than the four of them. In just a moment, more than 10 golden armored centipedes flew over and landed at the place where Mo Jiao had been killed. They circled for a while, looking for Mo Jiao's body. -8. Chapter 2008. But because they couldn't find the corpse, these golden silk-armored centipedes became somewhat agitated, and some even flew into a rage. They searched for a long time in the vicinity, and even passed by Xiao Hua and the others several times. Then, they roared a few times at one of the golden silk-armored centipedes. Like monkeys scattering when the tree falls, the golden silk-armored centipede that was reprimanded also hung its head dejectedly and flew at the very back. But when the last golden silk-armored centipede flew past Chen Yi, it suddenly stopped and looked in the direction where Chen Yi's figure was hiding. Its nose twitched, as if it had discovered something. Moreover, it hesitantly moved towards Chen Yi bit by bit. As the golden silk-armored centipede got closer and closer, this spiritual beast became more and more excited. In the end, it actually started to squeak loudly. The other golden silk-armored centipedes that had already left a long time ago were also attracted by this golden silk-armored centipede. They stopped, and a few even flew back. "Go tilde," Zhu Chenghe growled. The four of them simultaneously appeared not far from the golden silk-armored centipede and flew towards a direction at an extremely fast speed. Behind them, Xiao Hua didn't seem to be fast, but in reality, he didn't fall behind by much and flew up as well. Squeak squeak, the golden silk-armored centipedes were stunned for a moment. Then, they all flew up and chased after Chen Yi and the others. 3 days later, at the intersection of 3 mountain ranges, there was a place where the vegetation was slightly lush. It was abnormally quiet. Not only were there no sounds of birds or insects, there wasn't even the sound of the wind. The low shrubs were like black trees, pitch black like iron. The pitch black weeds were in the shape of 3 leaves, slanting towards the sky, giving off a heavy feeling. The bottom of this valley was filled with black fog. The black fog was also like pitch black mountain rocks. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't necessarily be able to see it. The top of the valley faced this side of the sky. But above the sky, there were layers of black clouds, like the clouds before a thunderstorm. However, these cumulus clouds were not as translucent as thunderclouds. Instead, they were pitch black. If one were to look closely, they would look like ferocious ghost faces. At a low altitude to the south, Zhu Chenghe and the other 3 suddenly appeared. As they struggled to fly in this direction, they looked back from time to time. When they were a few miles away, the 4 of them suddenly plummeted. Chen Yi and the other 2 were shocked, but Zhu Chenghe's face was filled with joy. He shouted, "Fellow Taoists, we are close to that place. Our Dharma power will be confined. Let's go down now. When we reach this place, neither the golden silk armor centipede nor Mo Jiao will dare to come here." "Ah, and here," Chen Yi was slightly stunned. She regained her balance and asked curiously, "How did fellow Daoist Zhu find this place?" "Hehe, this is all fate." Zhu Chenghe smiled but did not answer. The four of them landed on the mountain path, looking very embarrassed. Xie Zhiqian still did not forget to look back. He frowned and said, "Xiao Hua. I'm afraid he can't escape from the golden silk armor centipede. I've already said that his cultivation base is too shallow," Zhu Chenghe said coldly. "If he comes here, he'll only be a burden. He might even lose his life." Zhu Chenghe said coldly. But when he looked up, he was dumbfounded. In the distance, Xiao Hua was slowly flying over. Although he looked like a baby learning to walk, he still flew over to them. "Damn it, this guy is simply a cockroach, an ant that can't be dragged down." Qiong Yefeng shook his head, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. "Senior. Wait for me." Xiao Hua was out of breath and raised his hand with a pale face. Then, his whole body swayed, and his expression was stunned. Then, he fell from the low altitude like a stone. "Ha ha ha." Chen Yi covered her mouth and laughed. "I forgot to remind him that his cultivation is shallow. He fell earlier than us." Then, the four of them did not say anything more. They sat cross-legged, took out spiritual pills from their storage bags, and took them to recover their magic power and physical strength. In less than 5 minutes, Xiao Hua also arrived. Seeing the four of them meditating, he did not dare to disturb them. He sat a little farther away and took some spiritual pills himself. After another incense stick of time, Zhu Chenghe stood up first and looked around. "Fellow Zhu, how long until we reach that place?" Chen Yi asked behind him. Zhu Chenghe pointed to the front and said, "It's about 2 hours from here. Last time, I was near here. This mountain should be the right place." Then, Zhu Chenghe looked at Chen Yi and said in surprise, "Villa Master Chen, I'm a little confused. Your invisibility spiritual talisman. How could it be seen through by the golden silk armor centipede?" Chen Yi also shook her head. "To tell you the truth, I've been thinking about it for the past 3 days. We have been using our magic skills continuously. By right, we should have gotten rid of the golden silk armor centipede long ago. But every time, they seem to be able to find us accurately. It should be my position. I really don't understand." At this time, Xie Zhiqian and Qiong Yefeng also stood up. After hearing Chen Yi's words, Qiong Yefeng looked at Chen Yi thoughtfully for a while. Then, he said, "I've been thinking about this for a long time. Fellow cultivator Chen, I'm afraid you don't know the way in the mountain." "Hey, why do you say that? Could it be that you've found something?" Chen Yi was even more curious. Qiong Yefeng said with a smile, "I'm not sure. But since Villa Master Chen asked, I'll tell you." Chen Yi was unhappy and was about to refute him. Zhu Chenghe said with a smile, "Fellow cultivator Qiong, if you know something, you'd better tell me earlier." "Well, Villa Master Chen has lived in the Burial Flower Villa for a long time and has always been friends with spiritual herbs and spiritual flowers. You must have the fragrance of flowers and plants," Qiong Yefeng said with a smile. "Oh, you're right." Chen Yi slapped her forehead. Although there was regret on her face, there was no regret in her eyes. Instead, she said with some pride, "I neglected this matter. Although I've used a secret method, I can't completely remove the fragrance of spiritual flowers and spiritual herb. I don't know if it will affect our plan." "Fellow cultivator Qiong, you're right." Zhu Chenghe nodded and said, "But there are no golden armor centipedes in front of us, so it won't affect our plan." At this time, Xiao Hua also stood up and stood quietly behind them. Qiong Yefeng said with a smile, "Fellow cultivator Zhu, when Mobao appeared, we ran away in a hurry, but we couldn't find you. We even couldn't find you outside the Mobao Black Forest. We were very worried. Who knew that you could come here safely? It really made us happy." Zhu Chenghe heard Qiong Yefeng ask this question again. How could he not know what Qiong Yefeng was thinking? He said mysteriously, "Guess where I went." "Where?" Chen Yi was stunned. She looked at Qiong Yefeng and Xie Zhiqian and asked Zhu Chenghe. I'm still in the Mobao Black Forest." Zhu Chenghe said with a smile, "But I can't tell you where I went." "Oh." Chen Yi and the others looked a little unnatural. But Zhu Chenghe waved his hand, and a row of 3 intact Mobao corpses appeared in his storage bag. He said with a smile, "I've gained something. Of course, I won't forget it. These are for you." Ah! Chen Yi was pleasantly surprised. She waved her hand and put the corpses into her storage bag. She said, "It seems that fellow cultivator Zhu has gained a lot. Then I won't stand on ceremony." Heh. Zhu Chenghe smiled and didn't say much. Qiong Yefeng and Xie Zhiqian were also very happy. They had already put aside their questions. After all, this was Zhu Chenghe's privacy. As long as it didn't affect their plan, they were too lazy to ask more questions. Xiao Hua frowned. He knew that it was not easy to get these Mobao corpses. He couldn't help but murmur to himself, "Damn it, is it possible that Zhu Chenghe used a secret method similar to the sky-stealing sun-swapping to hide his cultivation? Is he more powerful than I thought?" However, Zhu Chenghe was so powerful that Xiao Hua didn't dare to say anything. His goal was the heavenly yin grass. He didn't care about sword spirits, sword cultivators, or sword immortals. "Let's go." Zhu Chenghe waved his hand with a smile. "There are Li Shoubai's 9 sword spirits and immortal brightsword's flying sword in front of us. If I'm not wrong, we will gain a lot here. These Mobao corpses are nothing." "Great." Chen Yi and the other 2 clapped their hands and followed Zhu Chenghe along the mountain path, ignoring Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua didn't say anything. He lowered his head and followed behind them. Although their magic power was restricted, they could still use their true yuan. Zhu Chenghe and the others were all gold core experts. It was easy for them to walk on the mountain path. Sure enough, after 2 hours, the mountain slowed down. The 5 of them arrived at the halfway point where the 3 mountain ranges intersected. Zhu Chenghe pointed at the thick black fog at the bottom of the valley and said with a smile, "It's here." "Here?" Qiong Yefeng and the others were puzzled when they saw the black fog. He asked curiously, "Here, our divine sense and magic power are restricted. We gold core cultivators are no different from ordinary people. Even if Li Shoubai and Immortal Brightsword are nascent soul seniors, how can they use their divine sense under such circumstances? How can they push their flying swords to the extreme? How can they fight well?" "Hehe, this is what I said that day." Zhu Chenghe said with a smile, "I've always thought so. Their duel must be in a place where they can use their flying sword divine sense. However, this place has long been searched by the seniors, but they couldn't find any traces. It wasn't until I accidentally came here last time and saw this object in a pitch-black mountain rock that I realized." As he said this, Zhu Chenghe clapped his hands and took out a sword orb with deep cracks. "Sword orb?" Chen Yi blurted out, "Is this the 9 stars transit sword orb?" As she said this, she reached out to take it. However, Zhu Chenghe pulled his hand back with a smile and said, "This item has a peculiar texture and is heavily damaged. The sword spirit inside is also very weak, so I can't determine if it's one of the sword pellets of 9 stars transit. However, after seeing the sword orb, I'm suddenly enlightened. Li Shoubai and Immortal Brightsword's swordsmanship has already reached a high level. The 2 of them must have had a duel in the White Sect, so there might not be any results. In order to compete, they chose a place where magic power, divine sense, or flying swords are not allowed. It's a pure duel of swordsmanship. Isn't that the best choice?" -8. Chapter 2009. Sword Dao has no regrets. Qiong Yefeng clapped his hands and said, "Didn't Immortal Brightsword say that in his message? Why didn't fellow Zhu tell us about the sword pill earlier?" Chen Yi looked a little embarrassed and asked, "The black fog here is very dangerous. We don't have divine thought and dharma power, so how can we go deep? Besides, everything is just fellow Zhu's guess. We don't know what's inside. How can there be a sword spirit?" "Hehe," Zhu Chenghe laughed and said, "Nothing is absolute in this world. After all, I've never been inside. Fellow Taoists, you're not 3-year-old babies. I'm afraid I don't need to explain this, right? However, since there is a sword pill here, and a very strange one at that, To tell you the truth, in the past 4 years, I went to Huan country and found some sword cultivators. I asked Li Xiubai about the origin of the 9 stars soaring sun sword pill. I already know that the Changbai sect's sword pill is somewhat different from others. This sword pill is the Changbai sect's disciples' sword pill. With such a clue, the answer is naturally obvious, right? This sword pill was deeply imprinted in the huge rock at that time. If I didn't fall, I might not have seen it. Well, the huge rock is over there. Fellow Taoists, you can go and take a look later. Zhu Chenghe was still smiling and said, where are the other 8 sword pills? If they're not damaged, in this place where divine thought and Dharma power are confined, the possibility of the sword spirits of the 8 sword pills is very high, right? With such a guess, isn't it worth it for us to go in and take a look? Senior Zhu, where's the heavenly yin grass? Xiao Hua seemed to have gathered his courage and asked. Hihi, it's the same. This is a place where yin and yang converge, and it's full of extreme yin. If the heavenly yin grass doesn't grow here, where can it grow? Zhu Chenghe said confidently. Moreover, to be honest, the seniors of Shu Yang sect have been here before, but they didn't go deep. Therefore, I know some of the details. Otherwise, I wouldn't have asked you to prepare those things. The heavenly yin grass was there in the past, but whether it's there now or not, I can't guarantee with you. Chong Yefeng and Xie thought for a while and nodded slightly. That's right. The guesses of the seniors of our humble sect should be similar to the ones near you. However, they probably didn't expect the 2 seniors of the Way of the Sword to abandon mana and spiritual will. How many people have failed to find this place? Even if they found it, they didn't think too much about it. They just missed the sword spirit and the other treasures for nothing. Xiao Hua didn't say much. He only looked at the black fog beneath his feet, deep in thought. This was where Zhen Qing's message was. However, when he saw that the sword pellet was different from his 9 sword pellets, he knew that his sword pellet was definitely not the sword pellet of 9 stars transit the sun. At that moment, he was thinking about how to pick the heavenly yin grass and whether to find that thing that wasn't controlled by consciousness. That's strange. We can't use our divine sense and magic power here. How did Martial Uncle Zhen Qing's master know that the object wasn't controlled by divine sense? Xiao Hua was somewhat puzzled. By the way, fellow Zhu, you said that you have something to explain to me. What is it? Chen Yi seemed to be half believing and half doubting. Hihi, not only do I have to explain to Villa Head Chen, but also to fellow Qiong and fellow Xiao. Zhu Chenghe seemed to know that Chen Yi had asked this question. He clapped his hands and took out 3 jade slips, handing them to the 3 of them. He said with a smile, although this place restricts your divine sense, you can still read the jade slips. I won't say anything. Take a look and you will know. Okay. Chen Yi and the other 2 took the jade slips and immersed their divine senses in them. Zhu Chenghe stared at Chen Yi without blinking. Ah! Chen Yi's expression changed slightly. She raised her head and looked at Zhu Chenghe. Zhu Chenghe said with a smile, these are the jade slips. Villa Head Chen, you don't have to be too surprised. Yes, I know. Chen Yi's face showed a trace of suspicion. She looked at the jade slips again. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the 3 of them withdrew their divine senses. Chong Yefeng said with a bitter smile, it turns out that the jade slips are so difficult. No wonder fellow Zhu came back empty-handed last time. Hihi, if fellow Zhu didn't come back empty-handed, how could we have come this time? Xie Zhiqian said with a smile. Chen Yi also forced a smile. Fortunately, although the jade slips are difficult, with our previous preparations, we should be able to pass. Okay, let us prepare. After a while, the black mist will change and we will be able to enter. Zhu Chenghe said with a smile. He turned to Xiao Hua and said, Xiao Hua, this place is very dangerous. We can't take care of you. It's not too late for you to change your mind. Xiao Hua took a deep breath and said, thank you, Senior Zhu. Junior has decided to go down. Ian, since you have decided, this old man can't say anything. Zhu Chenghe nodded. Chen Yi glanced at Xiao Hua and didn't say anything. Xiao Hua still stood behind everyone and quietly looked at the black mist. Zhen Qing's jade slips didn't explain how to break through the black mist. Perhaps Zhen Qing didn't remember, or perhaps Zhen Qing's master, Daoist Master Lu Peng, didn't explain. The jade slips only said that there were 4 layers under the black mist. Daoist Master Lu Peng only reached the 4th layer. Seeing that the situation was dangerous, he didn't covet anything and returned to the top of the mountain. As for the sky yin grass, Daoist Master Lu Peng didn't say anything. Or maybe Zhen Qing didn't write anything. After the time it took to eat a meal, a light breeze suddenly appeared in the silent mountain valley. Soon after, the wind stopped and gradually became stronger. But the strange thing was that the black mist wasn't affected by the wind at all. Not to mention that it was blown away, it didn't even seem to be blown away. Woo-woo, woo-woo. The wind blew everyone's robes. Chen Yi's beautiful hair fluttered in the wind. Her clothes fluttered in the wind, making her look like a goddess flying in the sky. At this moment, the instant Chen Yi raised her head and stroked her beautiful hair, a thin crack suddenly appeared in the sky that was filled with red clouds. The golden sunlight was like a golden sword that cut through the dense black air of the ink cloud black forest and directly pierced the thick black mist under Xiaohua's feet. Immediately, the black mist was like melted black snow as it violently rolled. This rolling was like a boiling bubble that quickly complained to the surroundings of the black mist. Shua tilde Xiaohua could hear the sound in his ears. The black mist that didn't move at all in the wind was now being pushed by the wind. It was like a pitch-black door was being pushed open. A faintly shining mountain valley appeared in Xiaohua's vision. Quickly, Zhu Chenghe ordered, "Fellow Taoists, I've already explained everything in the jade slip. We don't have much time. While the black mist is being pushed away, let's quickly enter." -8. Chapter 2010. As he spoke, he took the lead and rushed down the mountainside along the rugged path. Although immortal Lu Peng briefly described what he saw, Xiaohua, who rushed down the black fog with the others, was slightly startled when he saw the scene in front of him. Obviously, it was beyond his expectation. Below the black fog was not a common valley, nor was it the same as above the black fog. Rather than a valley, it was better to call it a cave or a space. Xiaohua looked around, only to see specks of light emerging from what looked like stone walls, but also seemed like thin mist. The light illuminated the surroundings. Moreover, extremely pure spiritual qi of heaven and earth lingered in the space. Because the black fog above was pushed away, the spiritual qi of heaven and earth flowed slightly and was about to blow above Xiaohua's head. However, it only flowed for a while and set off a slight wind, then stopped. Obviously, it was suppressed by something above his head. Hihi, how is it? Fellow Taoists, this is considered a cave paradise, right? Zhu Chenghe looked at the stunned expressions of the crowd and chuckled. When I came here that year, I really wanted to stay and cultivate, and never go out again. Sure enough, it is a cave paradise. Such pure spiritual qi of heaven and earth is rare in other places of the Dawn Rain continent, right? Chen Yi came to her senses and murmured, "The spiritual herbs here are growing so vigorously, but unfortunately, they are not very old. If my burial flower manor could move here, I would never want to go out in this lifetime." "Haha, Fairy Chen," Zhu Chenghe said with a smile, "this place looks peaceful, but it is full of dangers. Once the ink fog is sealed, there will be no chance of survival. Only those who have been exposed to the sunlight for several hours can enter this place. Your burial flower manor has come here, and all the spiritual herbs are flourishing. Everyone is. What's the use of that?" "I see." Chen Yi nodded. "That's what I thought. Since the black fog forest is so dangerous, how could the core area be so safe? Hehe, this place is only close to the core area, but it is far from the core area." Zhu Chenghe shook his head and said, "I'm afraid that only spirit severing stage seniors can enter the core area." "Fellow Daoist Zhu, I don't understand." Xie Zhiqian coughed and said, "Ink sand corrodes true essence, and it also has the effect of blocking the world energy. Why is there such a rich world energy here? And not be corroded by the ink sand?" "Hihi, I don't know the exact reason. I think it's because Mo Jiao and the Dark Forest Group have blocked all the heaven and earth spiritual energy, So the heaven and earth spiritual energy is gathered here. Zhu Chenghe was a little impatient. He looked at Chen Yi and said, Manor Lord Chen, you should first see if there are any spiritual herbs that you need. I will go with fellow Daoist Chong to see the place that leads to the lower level. Okay tilde. Since she couldn't use her divine sense here, Chen Yi naturally had to check the plants one by one. She agreed and skipped away happily. Xie Zhiqian was not interested in the spirit grass. He also followed Zhu Chenghe and Qiong Yefeng to check along the stone wall. It seemed that he was looking for something. Xiao Hua understood that this was the first level of the valley. It was separated from the second level by a natural restriction. It required a special method to weaken or break the restriction in order to enter the second level. It was the same for the later levels. But for some reason, Zhen Qing's Jade Slip didn't explain the key points in detail. It only gave a simple introduction. Xiao Hua originally thought that the key point was very simple, so Zhen Qing didn't explain it. But now, seeing the serious look on the faces of the golden core cultivators, how could Xiao Hua not know the importance of this key point? Naturally, Xiao Hua also knew that Zhen Qing didn't expect him to come here when he was only in the foundation establishment stage. He also understood that the thing that wasn't controlled by divine sense was probably just an excuse for Zhen Qing. The experience of condensing the golden core was the real thing that Zhen Qing used to repay him. After thinking for a while, Xiao Hua also went to check the spirit grass. After all, Zhu Chenghe didn't say which level the heavenly yin grass was on. However, he and Chen Yi went in the opposite direction. They started from the other side of the stone wall. The spirit grass here was just as Chen Yi said. Although they were flourishing and some of them were relatively rare, their age wasn't too old. From time to time, senior cultivators with profound cultivation would come here to pick them. Since Chen Yi didn't care, Xiao Hua also didn't care. After searching for half a pack of cigarettes, Xiao Hua had only found a few young spirit herbs that he didn't recognize and moved them into his space. At this time, just as Xiao Hua straightened up and wanted to move forward, a faint light flashed from the side of a spirit grass seedling in front of him. If Xiao Hua's sixth senses weren't far superior to ordinary cultivators, he might not have seen it. Yi! What is that? Xiao Hua was slightly surprised and his heart trembled. Could it be a spirit beast that looks after the spirit grass? Immediately, Xiao Hua became cautious and slowly walked over. However, when Xiao Hua walked over, it was only an ordinary spirit grass. How could there be a spirit beast that looked after it? Xiao Hua, did you pick some special spirit grass? Not far ahead, Chen Yi unexpectedly walked over from the white mist and asked strangely, "Can you fly here?" Xiao Hua didn't answer and looked at Chen Yi's feet and asked instead. He, this is a natural restriction. Cultivators won't fall down if they walk on it. Chen Yi pursed her lips and said with a smile, if you can fall down, would fellow Daoist you still spend so much effort to find the key to go down? Junior's knowledge is shallow. I've really made Senior laugh. Xiao Hua suddenly understood and pointed his finger again, saying, Junior just saw that there was a brilliance beside this spirit grass and thought it was some rare spirit grass that had a spirit beast looking after it. However, I came to take a look and found it to be very ordinary. I'm afraid Junior's eyes are playing tricks on me. Your eyes must be playing tricks on you. Chen Yi raised her eyebrows and said with a nod, the spirit grass here is very ordinary. It's planted in my burial flower manor. Your heavenly yin grass definitely won't be here. You don't need to look carefully. Junior understands. Junior doesn't need Senior's help. I still want to find a few spirit grass that can be used for foundation establishment. Xiao Hua said with a smile. However, without waiting for him to finish, Chen Yi waved her hand and said, I've already looked. These spirit grass are too young and can't be used for anything. You don't need to waste your time. Soon after, she raised her head and looked into the distance. She said, let's go. Fellow Daoist, you must have found the way down by now. We'd better go there as soon as possible. Don't delay. Your cultivation level is the lowest, so you'd better follow us closely. Junior understands. Xiao Hua bowed and saluted, then followed Chen Yi in the direction Zhu Chenghe had gone. Although Xiao Hua left, He was still muttering in his heart. He looked back slightly, but even after he walked far away, he still couldn't see anything unusual. This is a bit strange. Xiao Hua didn't think his eyes were playing tricks on him and muttered in his heart. However, right at this moment, he heard Zhu Chenghe's laughter in front of him. Haha, as I said, the seniors of my Shu Yang school have already been here before. The records in the ancient records are definitely correct. When Chen Yi heard this, she turned her head and glanced at Xiao Hua. She waved her hand and motioned for Xiao Hua to follow her while she quickly walked over. After walking for about 100 feet, Xiao Hua saw Zhu Chenghe and the others under a few inexplicable vines with misty spiritual aura lingering around them. It was a thick vine with big bumps on top of each other. There were some 3-inch-long thorns on each of the bumps, which were shining with a strange red brilliance. Sky-piercing vine? When Chen Yi saw this thing, she was a little surprised and whispered, although this thing is called a vine, it's actually very fierce. It can devour people's essence and blood. It can even turn into a human after a long time. This thing actually still exists in the world. Ah! When Xie Zhiqian and Qiong Yefeng heard this, their bodies slightly shrank and they moved further away from the sky-piercing vine. They were afraid that the sky-piercing vine would suddenly attack them. Fellow Taoists, don't panic. Zhu Chenghe said with a smile, this thing is still in its infancy. It's still far from being able to hurt people. Villa Head Chen is talking about the sky-piercing vine that is hundreds of thousands of years old. That kind of monster is against the natural order. It doesn't exist in the Xiaoyu continent now. Fellow Daoist Zhu is right. That's right. Chen Yi covered her mouth and laughed. This sky-piercing vine has another advantage. As long as it has something to rely on, it can continue to grow, no matter how high it is. The word sky-piercing comes from this. A trace of gloominess flashed across Qiong Yefeng's face. He stood aside coldly, as if he was embarrassed by Chen Yi's deliberate teasing. Zhu Chenghe acted as if he didn't see it and said with a smile, Villa Head Chen, now you know why I asked you to prepare the ice orchid bamboo? I understand. Chen Yi nodded and said, this ice orchid bamboo is condensed by the ice orchid insect, which is the natural enemy of the sky-piercing vine. Wherever the ice orchid insect is, there will be no sky-piercing vine. Why? Xie Zhiqian asked curiously, these two don't seem to have anything to do with each other. The ice orchid insect likes fragrant and wood-type spiritual qi the most. Although the sky-piercing vine is not as attractive to the ice orchid insect as the ice orchid bamboo, if the ice orchid insect smells the scent of the sky-piercing vine, it will certainly absorb it. Chen Yi explained with a smile, however, the sky-piercing vine is not as hard as the ice orchid bamboo. Once the ice orchid insect absorbs it, the sky-piercing vine will be corroded, and all the harmful things in the vine will be swallowed by the ice orchid insect. The sky-piercing vine will also die. In addition, even if the ice orchid insect dies, the things in its corpse will still be a threat to the sky-piercing vine, so the ice orchid bamboo is the best way to deal with the sky-piercing vine. As she spoke, Chen Yi smiled and took out an ice orchid bamboo that was more than a foot long from her storage bag and handed it to Xiao Hua. Go, put this ice orchid bamboo on the sky-piercing vine. Xiao Hua was slightly stunned, but he had to bite the bullet and take the ice orchid bamboo. Xiao Hua, be careful. When you put the ice orchid bamboo in, it will definitely release the things in the sky-piercing vine. Don't touch those things. If it wasn't for Xiao Hua, it would definitely be Xie Zhiqian who did this. Therefore, Xie Zhiqian kindly reminded Xiao Hua. -8. Chapter 2011. Thank you, Senior. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. Holding the bamboo in his hand, he walked to the side of the sky-soaring vine and looked it up and down. His eyes turned slightly, then he waved his hand. It looked very casual, but the angle of insertion was very precise. With a light puff sound, the bamboo was easily inserted into the sky-soaring vine. Not a drop of poison seeped out. But at the same time, Qiong Yefeng cried out in alarm and quickly dodged to the side. Xiao Hua looked back in shock and saw a peach-red liquid spurting out from the bamboo towards Qiong Yefeng who was standing beside him. Oh, Senior Qiong, Xiao Hua saw this and his face was full of apology. He hurriedly shouted, "Junior made a mistake. Junior didn't expect this bamboo to be hollow." "Phut," Chenyi covered her mouth and laughed, "this bamboo is not hollow, but when it comes in contact with the juice of the sky-soaring vine, the texture in the center will quickly melt." Buzz, buzz. Just when Qiong Yefeng was angry and wanted to hit Xiao Hua with his hand, he heard a loud roar in the valley. Looking at the sky-soaring vine in front of Xiao Hua, it began to gradually tremble, shaking the nearby stone wall. The bamboo that was inserted into the sky-soaring vine began to slowly melt and merge into the wound of the sky-soaring vine. "Let's hide aside." Zhu Chenghe didn't understand and hurriedly retreated to the side. The sky-soaring vine began to twist, like a snake's tail being stepped on. The peach-red juice of the sky-soaring vine also spilled out in the air. The sky-soaring vine swayed for a moment, then slowly twitched again and gradually shrank down along the stone wall. When the sky-soaring vine disappeared, revealing a hole the size of several people, Xiao Hua immediately understood that Zhu Chenghe and the others were planning to do this. "Xiao Hua, you go down first." Zhu Chenghe ordered without hesitation. "Yes, Junior will go down first." Xiao Hua responded, walked to the hole, and poked his head out to take a look. This was the same stone wall as the first floor. There was nothing special about it. Xiao Hua sized it up and jumped down. However, just as his figure landed on the precipitous part of the stone wall, he heard a gust of wind. A black shadow flashed past and whipped towards Xiao Hua's head from the top. Xiao Hua's transcendence energy is completely depleted, but he still has his fists and kicks. He waved his hand, wanting to block the shadow. But when he glanced over, he realized that the black shadow was actually the gigantic sky-reaching vine from before. Numerous sharp thorns were piercing towards him. Moreover, the whooshing sound of the wind indicated that the vines were extremely powerful. Xiao Hua waved his hand. Originally, he wanted to take out the Great Wisdom Sword. However, his hand only moved slightly before stopping. His feet moved slightly as he used the ethereal steps. His figure flashed to the left and easily dodged the sky-soaring vine. Peng! The sky-reaching vines hit the stone wall. Dozens of tiny holes appeared on the hard stone wall. It was obviously the work of those thorns. The sky-reaching vine was actually extremely nimble. Using the counterattack force from the stone wall, it turned horizontally and struck towards Xiao Hua's waist. Xiao Hua frowned slightly. Without waiting for the vines to reach him, he jumped into the air and somersaulted just in time to dodge the vines. The shiny thorns barely scratched Xiao Hua's waist. However, this wasn't the end of it. While Xiao Hua's figure was still in the air, a dozen or so vines that were attached to the stone wall shook and swung towards Xiao Hua from all directions. "Damn it!" Xiao Hua cursed in his heart. He looked at the hole from the side. Zhu Chenghe and the other three did not appear. Clearly, they were waiting. "Forget it." Xiao Hua sneered. His figure moved and he used the ethereal steps. It seemed that he did not use his magic power but relied on the strength of his body to escape into the distance. The second floor was somewhat different from the first floor. It seemed that the space was much larger. The natural restriction under Xiao Hua's feet made it soft to step on. It was no different from stepping on grass. Following Xiao Hua's escape, the sky-reaching vine was like a giant hand bearing its fangs and brandishing its claws. It chased after him and swayed. After half a cup of tea's time, Xie Zhiqian poked his head out of the hole. Seeing that there was no movement, he shouted, "Manor Lord Chen, wait for a while. Xiao Hua has lured the sky-reaching vine away." En. Zhu Chenghe and the others jumped down. Looking at the nearby tranquility and listening to the sound of collision in the distance, the four of them were calm. "Actually, we should let Xiao Hua know the situation," Qiong Yefeng said in a low voice. "At least he can be prepared." Zhu Chenghe narrowed his eyes and said, "This place is very dangerous. I have already told him. If he wants to come here, I can't do anything about it. But I only prepared 3 jade slips. With one more, there will be more danger of it being leaked. Could it be that the 3 of you are not afraid that the Changbai sect or the Flame Bamboo Sword sect will come after you? Don't say so many useless things." Chen Yi said calmly, let's quickly find the way to the 3rd floor. If Xiao Hua can come back safely, the sky-reaching grass is on the 3rd floor. Why don't we just let him pick it? Isn't this what he wants? Exactly. Zhu Chenghe nodded. He looked around and waved his hand. He quickly walked in a direction. Chen Yi and the others did not hesitate to follow. This time, no one looked in Xiao Hua's direction. As for Xiao Hua, his figure was fluttering as he fled. Once he was far away, he reckoned that Zhu Chenghe and the others wouldn't be able to see him. With a wave of his hand, the great wisdom heavy sword appeared in his hand. His figure leapt up and casually swung it. With a light shua sound, the sky-soaring vines were easily cut off by the heavy sword. With a pu sound, the peach-colored liquid sprayed out and filled the sky. Xiao Hua was not afraid at all. He had already calculated the angle. His figure flashed and dodged the juice. Then, he jumped up again and nimbly cut off several more vines. Woo-woo. Another gust of wind blew. The sky-soaring vines retreated. Although the remaining vines did not retreat, they still swayed in the distance and did not come closer. Xiao Hua coldly snorted. He raised his head and took a look. Then, with quick steps, he ran towards a small cave on the stone wall. After waiting for Xiao Hua's figure to disappear into the cave, those sky-soaring vines finally slowly retracted back, landing on some unknown stone wall. The sky-soaring vine was not weak. Not only was it fast, but it was also extremely sharp and poisonous. It could even swallow a cultivator's liquid. This was especially true in this place where one's divine sense and dharma power were restricted. Regardless of whether it was Chong Yefeng, Chen Yi, or even Zhu Chenghe, they might not be able to dodge the sky-soaring vine so easily. Unfortunately, the sky-soaring vine met Xiao Hua, a strong martial artist. It had to be said that this was a tragedy for the sky-soaring vine and a comedy for Zhu Chenghe and the others. -8. Chapter 2012. I'll rest here for a while first. Xiao Hua hid in the cave and laughed coldly. It won't be too late for me to go after you've found the path to the 3rd floor. Or perhaps, you all can go in first. I'll be a fisherman. But at this moment, Xiao Hua was slightly stunned. How can I use my divine sense in the cave? Of course, the cave wasn't very deep. It was only about 10 feet deep. Xiao Hua was currently sitting in the middle of the cave. His divine sense was naturally probing the inside of the cave. Although his divine sense couldn't extend very far, it was clearly much stronger than when he was in the valley. This is Li-Mion stone. Xiao Hua's divine sense landed on the stone wall, and he shockingly discovered that there was actually a piece of refining material inside. Great! Xiao Hua was overjoyed upon seeing this. He didn't care about meditating and cultivating qi. He jumped up from the ground and released his Buddhist sense, examining it bit by bit. After he finished looking, he unconsciously stretched out the stone and said to himself, "Good, this cave isn't long, but there are a lot of refining materials inside. Although they aren't too rare, if I were to search for them in the auction, wouldn't I have to spend a lot of spirit stones? Now I actually have all of them, it's really not bad." Xiao Hua immediately calmed down his angry thoughts. He picked up the great wisdom sword and became a miner, digging out the materials that he could see with his Buddhist sense one by one and storing them into his space. Alas, everything is good here, but unfortunately there's no Qianmo stone. This place should be like what Zhu Chenghe said, it's the place where the spiritual energy of Ink Shadow Black Forest gathers. A lot of materials are formed because of the pressure of ink sand. It can be said that there are a lot of rare materials in the entire mountain range. Xiao Hua thought as he put away all the materials he could get his hands on. He clapped his hands and sat down. But immediately after, Xiao Hua slapped his forehead and laughed. Damn it, this young master is stupid. This cave is probably where those nascent soul and even spirit-severing cultivators come to look for refining materials, right? The materials that I picked were probably left here by those seniors who disdained to use them, right? This is bad. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua was suddenly startled. Since there are so many caves here, then, perhaps the passage to the third floor is inside one of the caves. This young master only cares about resting here. If those shameless seniors think that this young master has died and enter the third level without waiting for this young master, then wouldn't this young master's heavenly yin grass be lost? Forget it. For Shui Shui's sake, I'll endure it for now. Xiao Hua thought and didn't dare to be negligent. He hurriedly ran out of the cave and returned along the route he had just escaped. Xiao Hua ran for a moment, but he heard a suo-suo sound not too far ahead. He could not help but be delighted. Senior Zhu, this kid is here. However, when he finished shouting, the suo-suo sound in front of him disappeared again. No one answered him. Hey! Is it Senior Zhu? Xiao Hua was slightly taken aback. With a wave of his hand, the great wisdom heavy sword appeared in his hand. Step by step, he walked forward. However, even when he walked to the front of a cave, he still did not see a single person. Strange, what's wrong with me today? Xiao Hua scratched his head. Why am I always so suspicious? Wu tilde. Just when Xiao Hua was bewildered, a slightly thin sky-soaring vine shot out from under Xiao Hua's feet. Like a poisonous snake, it coiled around Xiao Hua. I was wondering. So it's just this thing. Xiao Hua did not even think. With a wave of his hand, he actually chopped the sky-soaring vine into several pieces. Xiao Hua himself also quickly dodged and hid in the cave. The sky-soaring vine seemed to be in pain. It swayed and actually rushed into the cave, wanting to swallow Xiao Hua. Hee. It's really something delivered to my doorstep. Xiao Hua was overjoyed. His figure quickly rushed to the entrance of the cave. With a light wave of his hand, he actually cut off the sky-soaring vine that was several feet long. Then, with a wave of his hand, he did not touch the sky-soaring vine's vines and stored them into the space. Within the space, in an extremely distant place, other than the mountain of Mo Zhao's corpse, there was even more than these corpses. Black wood. These black wood were all extremely thick and long. Alas, not to mention the sky yin grass, just these things alone made Xiao Hua's trip to Mo Zhao's black forest worthwhile. The sky-soaring vine that had its vines chopped off by Xiao Hua one after another was really scared at this time. With a rustling sound, it pulled back its vines and did not dare to show its face again. Xiao Hua also casually dug out several pieces of refining materials before leisurely coming out of the cave. Thank you, Senior. Thank you, Senior. Xiao Hua ran to the entrance of the cave from the first floor to the second floor and shouted. Unfortunately, no one responded. Damn it! Xiao Hua was somewhat helpless. He looked left and right, then his gaze fell on the ground and smiled. He saw that there were some spiritual herbs on the ground, but at this time, some of them had fallen. It was the traces of someone walking past. Although it was not obvious, Xiao Hua could still distinguish it. These gold core cultivators. Xiao Hua shook his head. Although they are very old and their cultivation is profound, they have been interacting with the spiritual energy of heaven and earth since they were young. They are associated with divine sense. Suddenly losing these divine abilities, they seem to be no different from ordinary people. Suddenly, Xiao Hua thought again. In this place, this young master's strength directly suppressed the four of them. If this young master is angry, won't the four of them lose their lives? Why should this young master be so timid? Just directly subdue them and bring this young master to pick the heavenly yin grass. Or, let Chen Yi pick it for this young master. Wouldn't that be better? Unless I kill them all here. Xiao Hua immediately put away this baseless thought. Otherwise, if this young master leaves the Ink Jiao Black Forest, will this young master still be alive? Following the faint traces on the stone wall, Xiao Hua really found the front of a cave. However, this cave was obviously different from the other caves Xiao Hua had seen before. There was a thick fog in the cave, and he could not see clearly inside. Senior Zhu. Manor Lord Chen? Xiao Hua did not dare to release his divine sense, and also did not dare to rashly enter. He could only shout softly. Yi. Xiao Hua. You are still alive. Xie Zhiqian's voice sounded from the side of the cave. Yes, it is this junior. Xiao Hua smiled and cupped his hands. Senior Xie, have you not gone down yet? Ian, I am waiting. Xie Zhiqian's figure appeared from the fog with a short sword in his hand. The time is not right. The entrance to the third floor has not appeared yet. Ian, you came at the right time. You stay here and guard. I will go in and take a look. Yes. Xiao Hua nodded and entered the cave. He stood at the place where Xie Zhiqian was guarding. Not long after, Zhu Chenghe walked out and sized up Xiao Hua. He frowned and said, Xiao Hua, how did you escape from the sky-soaring vine? How did you find this place? All right, I will let Senior Zhu know. Xiao Hua bowed and said, after this junior lured the sky-soaring vine away, I happened to find a cave on the stone wall and quickly hid inside. The cave was very long, and the sky-soaring vine could not penetrate it. This junior waited for a while, but there were no more sky-soaring vines, so I came out. Ian, you are quite clever. Zhu Chenghe raised his eyebrows and nodded slightly. There are many similar caves on the stone wall. How did you find them? After Xiao Hua explained the reason, Zhu Chenghe frowned again and looked at the ground outside the stone wall. It was as Xiao Hua said. Alas, the ancients are right. Pay attention to everything and learn. Zhu Chenghe shook his head and said, this old man calculated and calculated to cover up his tracks, but I never thought that I would make such a big mistake. Fortunately, there are few people here. Otherwise, we would have been discovered. Senior Zhu. Xiao Hua's heart moved and said, when this junior was on the first floor, I seemed to have seen some brilliance, and I also seemed to have heard some movement, but, what? Zhu Chenghe raised his eyebrows and rushed out. He looked around for a long time, then frowned and asked, are you sure? Hihi, of course this junior can't be sure. Otherwise, I would have already told the seniors. Xiao Hua shook his head. Well, there is usually no one in the core area of the ink cloud black forest. Moreover, the cultivators who come here are all nascent soul stage seniors. They won't be so sneaky. Zhu Chenghe nodded and said, the movements you mentioned are probably caused by the sky-climbing vine, right? Ian, this junior thinks so too. Because I was attacked by another vine, this junior had no choice but to hide in the cave again. Xiao Hua smiled apologetically. At this moment, Chen Yi's voice sounded from inside the cave, fellow Daoist Zhu, there is movement. Come quickly. Xiao Hua, you come too. Zhu Chenghe waved his hand and said, follow me to the third floor. There should be sky yin grass there. You can pick it yourself. Thank you, Senior Zhu. Xiao Hua quickly bowed and carefully followed Zhu Chenghe into the cave. This cave was actually very long. Moreover, there were some natural bends inside. However, fortunately, there were no forks. Zhu Chenghe and Xiao Hua walked for a moment and reached the end of the cave. At the end of the cave was a space of several zhong. At the bottom of the space was a clear spring. The spring was about 1 zhong wide. Around the spring, on the stone walls, there were many spiritual herbs. These spiritual herbs were not pure white and looked like they were carved out of ice and jade. Before Xiao Hua could get close, a chill rushed over him. Xiao Hua couldn't help but shiver. This is a fire spirit pill. Take one. Zhu Chenghe didn't turn around. With a flick of his hand, a green bean-sized pill was thrown to Xiao Hua. Thank you, Senior. Xiao Hua took the pill and hesitated for a moment before opening his mouth and swallowing it. Sure enough, a stream of heat flowed out from his dantian as he swallowed the fire spirit pill. Soon after, it flowed through his limbs and bones, and the chill gradually faded away. How is the reaction of the ice spring? Zhu Chenghe asked in a low voice. There was a slight tremor just now. There was a ripple in the center of the ice spring. However, it only lasted for a moment before it calmed down. Chen Yi said in a low voice. Her gaze swept past Xiao Hua's face. Ian, it's good that there was a tremor. The ancient records say that there are 9 tremors. After 9 tremors, we will have a chance. Zhu Chenghe turned to look at Xie Zhiqian. In a moment, I will have to ask fellow Daoist Xie to make a move. -8. Chapter 2013. Well said. Xie Zhiqian nodded. I've been itching to try for a long time. He tilde Zhu Chenghe laughed and turned his attention back to the ice spring. Why can't I use my divine sense here? Xiao Hua tried to use his Buddhist sense and divine sense, but they couldn't leave his body. It's completely different from the cave just now. Villa Master Chen, these spirit herbs look very rare. Xiao Hua looked at the spirit herbs above the ice spring and couldn't help but whisper. "Ph, I also want to pick them." Chen Yi snorted unhappily. "Unfortunately, we don't have divine sense or magic power, so we can't use the picking technique. These spirit herbs are born from the ice spring's extreme yin spiritual energy. If we touch them with our flesh and blood, not only will we be immediately contaminated, we won't be able to use them. If it's serious, we'll immediately turn into spiritual energy and our bodies will also be injured." She glanced at Xiao Hua and teased, "How about you go and pick them?" Xiao Hua heard and shook his head. Senior doesn't dare to take the risk, how can junior dare? It's better to be honest. However, Xiao Hua was calculating in his heart how to find a time when the four of them weren't paying attention and use his divine sense to take these spirit herbs into his space. After a few breaths, the center of the ice spring began to tremble slightly, as if a needle had pierced it. Ripples spread out in succession and quickly spread in all directions. Xiao Hua saw it clearly and his eyes turned rapidly. This was really strange because there wasn't any movement nearby. Soon after, the trembling became even more intense, each time faster than the previous one. After the 9th time, the entire ice spring suddenly began to boil. One by one, thumb-sized bubbles formed in the middle of the ice spring and quickly spurted out. Waves of extremely cold air rushed into the air and landed on the white sparkling spirit grass on the stone wall. Right now. Hearing Zhu Chenghe's soft reprimand, Xie Zhiqian reached into his bosom and took out a fiery red pill. He raised his head and swallowed it. Then, a trace of dark red appeared on his face. Then, his left hand activated magic power and a spell was formed. Immediately after, Xie Zhiqian pulled his right hand again and untied the storage bag at his waist. With a shake of his hand, a fiery red flame flew out from the storage bag. It was a fist-sized fire bat king. When Xie Zhiqian saw the fire bat king come out, he struck the center of the cold spring with his left hand. Hualala! The sound of ice sealing was heard, and a few wisps of white flames appeared above the cold spring. The fire bat king circled around Leng Quan a few times in the air. It squeaked angrily and rushed towards Leng Quan. The fire bat king's squeaking sound wasn't very loud, but in Xiao Hua's ears, there was a burst of ringing in his ears. Even his brain felt waves of pain. This pain was extremely similar to the pain he had felt when refining the jade blood pill, but it was much lighter in comparison. Xiao Hua only frowned slightly, not caring about it at all. Looking at the many bubbles above the cold spring, under the fire bat king's squeaking sounds, they all popped one after another. Even the dozen or so white spirit herbs on the stone wall began to crack. In the end, they gradually broke apart and fell into the cold spring. Just as the fire bat king was halfway there, at the center of the cold spring, where the bubble had burst, there was another vibration that was 10 times stronger than before. This time, it was even stronger, and it formed a deep concave shape. When the fire bat king rushed into the concave shape, 100 times stronger vibration was generated in the cold spring. Finally, with a bang, the entire cold spring suddenly disappeared. A hole about 10 feet wide appeared in front of Xiao Hua and the others. Waves of cold air rushed out from the hole. "Let's go," Zhu Chenghe growled. He took the lead and jumped into the hole. Chen Yi and the others also followed without hesitation. On the other hand, Xiao Hua hesitated slightly. He looked up at the few white spiritual herbs and sighed. He also jumped down, seemingly a little regretful. With a kai sound, Xiao Hua only felt a slight blur in front of his eyes. Before he could see the situation in front of him clearly, his feet slipped, and his whole body suddenly fell down. Ouch! Xiao Hua was shocked. He slapped his hand, wanting to use the force to reverse his body and maintain his balance. However, the place where his hand fell was strangely cold and smooth. It was as if there was no force at all. Thus, Xiao Hua's whole body curled up and slid down along the smooth surface. At this time, Xiao Hua could clearly see that this was a slanted slope. The slope was completely formed from transparent ice. This ice was incomparably hard and smooth. Not only was Xiao Hua sliding down the slope, but the 4 people who had entered before were also sliding down. It was just that they had slid down a bit further. Damn it! Xiao Hua was slightly stunned. Immortal Lu Peng didn't seem to have mentioned such a difficult place, right? Or Martial Uncle Zhen Qing didn't write it down? Although the slope was incomparably smooth, it wasn't long. Xiao Hua quickly slid down to the bottom of the valley. Zhu Chenghe and the others had already climbed up and hid at the side. Seeing that everyone was in the same sorry state as him, Xiao Hua secretly laughed. However, he didn't dare to say anything. He tidied up his daoist robe and obediently stood at the side. However, Xiao Hua's eyes didn't stay idle. They looked around randomly, trying to find the whereabouts of the heavenly yin grass. He saw that this was a narrow slanted valley. It was completely formed by transparent ice. He didn't know how thick the transparent ice was, but he could faintly see the reflection of everyone. In this frozen valley, he didn't see any greenery. Instead, there were some things that were similar to the spiritual herbs above the cold spring. They grew on the steep ice valley. Ari, it's easy to come down, but difficult to go up. Xiao Hua sighed and looked at the slope that he came down from. In a situation where he didn't have any magic power, going up from here was really strenuous. However, since Zhu Chenghe and the others came prepared, Xiao Hua didn't think too much. If they could go up, Xiao Hua naturally could too. Wait a moment, let me take a look. At this moment, Zhu Chenghe's face was somewhat dignified. All 4 sides here are the same. It's very difficult to distinguish the direction. According to the sect's ancient records, it's very special. Oh, it's over there, Zhu Chenghe said as he looked around. It was unknown what he saw, but he pointed at an ice wall and said. Xiao Hua was curious. He looked for a long time, but he couldn't find any clues. He couldn't help but secretly shake his head. Zhu Chenghe led everyone towards the ice wall with great difficulty. They were really slipping 3 times with each step. They were in an extremely sorry state. The faces of these gold core and foundation establishment cultivators had already been smashed countless times here. Seeing the ice wall in front of them, the strange thing was that although it was clearly a solid ice wall, when they walked in front of it, it was actually just a shadow, a reflection of the ice wall on the other side. -8. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.